Owen.
Here.
Dr. King.
Here.
Ms. Page.
Here.
Madam Chair, you've been joined by our student.
Good evening, everybody. Glenique, you know, I'm going to read the bio and then you can say your introductory remarks. Sound good? Yeah. Okay. Glenique is currently a senior at Huguenot High School. She has been an RPS student throughout her entire educational career, having attended Blackwell and Southampton Elementary Schools and Lucille Brown Middle School. Glenique currently serves on my Student Advisory Council and is a member of the Yearbook Committee, Student Council, Chick-fil-A Leaders Academy, Art Club, and has been a Huguenot Falcon cheerleader for 4 years. In addition, she also works as a customer service associate at Brauer. Glenique has received numerous college acceptances, including VCU, Virginia State, ODU, and Mary Washington, just to name a few. It says here that she's awaiting a decision from JMU, but I am very glad to let you know that not only has she been admitted to JMU, but she has also received a first-generation college student scholarship. We could not be prouder. Congratulations. And you have a few introductory remarks? Pull it close. You can't pull. Scooch in. Very good. All right. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Buenas noches. Si hubiera necesidad de un intérprete en español, de inglés a español, aquí estoy presente en la parte de atrás. Gracias.
Thank you. Glenique, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? And we'll have our moment of silence. Okay. So it's time to adopt the agenda. Do I hear a motion to do that?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, moving on. We have several sets of minutes. Okay. Do we need a motion for that? You do. All right. I have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 10th Education Compact meeting and the October 21st School Board meeting.
So move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And then we have some recognitions, and we'll start. Are you doing these, Mr. Cameras?
I'm glad to.
Thank you.
We will begin with a resolution, a proclamation for 2020 National Nutrition Week. And it is up on board docs, but I will read it. Whereas food is the substance by which life is sustained, and whereas the type, quality, and amount of food that individuals consume each day plays a vital role in their overall health and physical fitness, and whereas there is a need for continuing nutrition education and a wide-scale effort to enhance healthy eating practices, and whereas Richmond Public Schools teachers engage students with exciting and rigorous teaching and learning, and whereas the school board of the City of Richmond recognizes and supports and encourages healthy eating habits, now therefore be it proclaimed that the school board of the City of Richmond joins the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and proclaims March 2020 National Nutrition Month, and be it further resolved that the school board of the City of Richmond encourages all members of the community to join the campaign and become concerned about their nutrition and the nutrition of others in the hope of achieving optimum health for both today and tomorrow. I also want to just give a personal note of gratitude to our nutrition staff who work hard every day to make sure that our young people have breakfast, lunch, and in many cases, afternoon meal as well, along with our teachers, who many of whom do breakfast in the classroom, our custodians who help keep those rooms in our schools clean after those meals, and many other folks who help make school nutrition possible. Do we have any such individuals with us tonight? Yes, Susan is here, and we have a few other folks.
Oh, yes.
Let's give them a big round of applause. Susan, could you just introduce everybody real quick?
Yes, I would like to introduce you to our, one of our managers at George West High School. This is Miss Barbara Briggs, Chef Briggs we can call her. And then we have Brigade Chef John Thompson right here. And our newest member of our organization, of our department, is Stephen Bewley, and he is the cafeteria manager for Bellevue.
Fantastic. Let's give them a big round of applause. Can we do a quick picture up front? Next, we have a proclamation in support and honor of our school social workers. Whereas the social work profession, including school social workers, for generations has worked to strengthen the well-being and meet the basic needs of all people, especially people who are vulnerable, oppressed, and living in poverty. And whereas this year's school social work theme, quote, Beacon of Hope, School Social Workers Lighting the Way, embodies the role of school social workers to light the way, emphasizing the whole child, collaborating with other professionals, linking students and families with needed services, and advocating for their profession. And whereas the school social work profession is a diverse profession that allows students of various ethnicities and religious backgrounds to make an immediate positive impact on their peers, and whereas school social workers work with other professions, community groups, lawmakers, civil rights, and other organizations to bring equal rights for all, and whereas school social workers have been and continue to stand ready to help students and their families, now therefore, in recognition of the numerous contributions made by school social workers, the school board of the City of Richmond joins the School Social Work Association of America and proclaims the week of March 1st through 7th, 2020, as School Social Work Week, and calls upon all citizens to join in celebration and support of the school social workers and the social work profession. And again, on behalf of the division, I just want to say how grateful we are for our social workers who address so many challenges each and every day supporting the young people in Richmond Public Schools. Their jobs go well beyond the job description, and we are incredibly grateful to them. Do we have any of our social workers to be recognized here this evening? I think we sure do. Come on.
Oh my goodness, look at them all.
Yes.
Come on up here.
All right. Maybe Miss Jones can introduce everybody, and then we'll come up for a picture. Oh.
I'll start with Dr. Bambi. He is our senior social worker.
Certainly. Thank you for the consideration and acknowledgement today. This is our Rita Chapman, who is school social worker at Chimborazo at Blackwell and Fisher Elementary. Ms. Lorian Wilder, school social worker at Chimborazo in Bellevue. Mr. Matthew Brauer works at George Wythe. Ms. Savage is at Elkhart Thompson. Ms. Tracy Wellman is at Huguenot High School. And Mr. Thomas Gillespie is at Albert Hill and Benford. Is there anyone else? All right.
Let's give him a big round of applause and come on up for a picture. Next, we have the 2020 Equity in Education Resolution. It reads, whereas inequities in schools have become an increasingly significant challenge in the United States and Virginia, and whereas the majority of school-age students are children of color, and in Virginia, 45% of public school students qualify for subsidized meals, and whereas we recognize that factors including but not limited to disability, race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status have a demonstrated history of impacting the educational opportunities provided to a student. And whereas the promise of public education is for every child to be successful in school and life, and whereas it is important for Virginia families, students, teachers, and school administrators to be aware of the diverse needs of learners and to encourage discussion of the challenges as a school community, and whereas the Virginia School Boards Association has established a task force on students and schools in challenging environments to make recommendations and to stay at the forefront of discussions on equity in Virginia schools, and whereas we recognize that inequities in resources, including educational settings and buildings, supplies, and technology impede student learning. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the School Board of the City of Richmond and the school administration do hereby recognize March 2020 as Virginia School Board Association Equity in Education Month in the Commonwealth of Virginia and the City of Richmond, and encourage the citizens of Richmond and families of Richmond Public Schools to discuss educational equity, best practices, and programming in Richmond City Public Schools. Don't believe we have anybody here representing equity, since I think we are all in the equity business, but if I am wrong, I am glad to be told so. Let's just give an enormous round of applause to all of our RPS staff who work every day on behalf of equity. And now I believe we are up to the REB award winners. For those of you who don't know, the REB Teaching Awards are one of the highest awards you can receive in the Richmond region for teaching excellence. I also think they are by far the coolest teaching awards you get because they give you a whole lot of money to go anywhere in the world you want. And so I'm going to call up our recipients. I'll read off each person's name and what they will be doing with their award. It is both incredibly inspiring and might cause a little bit of envy in the audience. So here it goes. John Barclay from Franklin Military Academy. We in the house? He's on his way. Well, I'm going to tell you, John got $12,000 to, quote, chase global solar phenomena, including the aurora borealis in Iceland and solar eclipses in Africa, southern Asia, and the southern Pacific Ocean. He is at Franklin Military Academy in the 7th District. Can we give him a big round of applause? Mr. Fisher from Chimborazo Elementary School, are you here? There he is. Is receiving, yes, let's give him a round of applause. $10,300 to attend the National Conference for Creating Trauma-Sensitive Schools in Atlanta and to explore the architecture, culture, and cuisines of New York, Egypt, and Singapore. Let's give him a big round of applause. Why don't you wait there? You can hang out and we'll do a picture at the end. Is that good? And then everyone can watch you and you'll really enjoy that. Okay. Nicole Fleming from Miles Jones Elementary School. Are you in the house? There she is.
There she is.
Let's give her a big round of applause. She is receiving $11,200 to make text-to-self connections through children's literature by traveling to New York, Alabama, and California. Congratulations. John Holland from John B. Carey Elementary. There you are. $11,500 to understand the life and work of Leonardo da Vinci as an example of STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, in action by visiting Portugal, Spain, France, and Italy. Congratulations. Natasha Thomas from Southampton Elementary School. There she is. $11,300 to embark on the African American experience through the lens of black artistry in Los Angeles and to make heritage connections in South Africa. Let's give her a big round of applause. And Denise Yancey from William Fox Elementary School. Is Denise here? All right, well, she got $8,300 to experience Spanish immersion in Panama and to observe the ecosystems and biodiversity of Panama, Costa Rica, and Mexico. Can we give all these extraordinary educators a big round of applause? Are
we done?
I'm done.
Okay. And I want to say that we are really going to work hard at recognizing all the wonderful things that go on in our schools, all the wonderful people that work in them and attend them. And if we haven't recognized you yet, I'll bet we will before it's all over with. So thank you to everybody who works in any capacity in Richmond Public Schools. Okay, moving on. Now it is time for our public information time. And if you would like to,
Two people who signed up.
oh, we have 2 people who signed in, and whether you signed in or not, and we'll get to those names, you have 3 minutes if you are speaking as an individual, 5 minutes if you're representing an organization. When you come up, please state your name and also sign in. And you can just sort of, we'll start with the 2 who signed in, and they are?
Rodney Walker and Cheryl and Scott Blage.
Okay, come on up.
Thank you for having me. My name is Rodney Walker. Excuse me. I'm speaking on behalf of Jacob's AIM. That's a nonprofit organization that serves the Richmond community. And I want to begin by saying my name is Rodney Walker, and not only am I the founder and executive director of Jacob's AIM, but I am the father of Jacob Walker. Jacob Walker was born 10 years ago with a rare, deadly form of dwarfism called oxysmodysplasia. When he was born, he was only given 4 to 5 years at the most to have for life. It was a grim prognosis, and it was hard for the ensuing years after his birth to know what to expect. He was never supposed to be able to walk, to talk, to do anything. If he even made it to 3 or 4 years of age, it was told that he would have to be on a ventilator, and he would be in distress until respiratory infection or the like caused his ultimate demise. Well, that was 10 years ago that we were told of Jacob and what was going to happen with him. And 10 years later, he's a healthy 10-year-old boy, we're glad to say. And although he's only 30 inches tall, and as a 10-year-old, that's quite small. He's not even 2.5 feet tall. He's one of the smallest boys in the world. But Jacob is driven with a passion to help other children to become the best that they can be. That's why we named this organization Jacob's AIM: acceptance, inclusion, and morality. Because for Jacob's entire life, as he hit those milestones he was never supposed to reach, we didn't know which one was going to be the one step closer to his ultimate demise, which never came, and we're fortunate. But in not knowing this ahead of time, we wanted every day of Jacob's life to have purpose and meaning, and we wanted to give him every opportunity to live life to its fullest. So we helped him with challenges. We helped him to understand just how important he was as an individual and as a life here on earth. And we did that from day one. And in doing so, we helped Jacob to understand that it doesn't matter what you look like or what lot you're given in life. Every child has a purpose and a value and is important. And in doing this, it has helped instill in Jacob a sense of self-recognition to himself of who he is as a person and what he can do for himself and for others as he lives his life to its fullest. In saying that, I made a prepared statement, and I hope you'll bear with me. I didn't want to mess anything up. And this all comes to how Jacob and how we, with Jacob's AIM, hope to become a vital part of helping Richmond Public Schools and working with you to help other children to overcome any challenges that they have within themselves and in the community. I am Rodney Walker, founder and executive director of Jacob's AIM, a local nonprofit organization dedicated to helping children who struggle with appearance or ability to reach their full potential in life. We as humans generally want to be accepted for who we are. Sure, we like to have a certain degree of uniqueness. It gives us our sense of individuality. We want to balance that, however, with a healthy dose of similarities with those we are around. We have natural tendencies to gravitate toward those with whom we share things in common, and we do this as adults and have since childhood. When we were children, our first friendships were with those who we saw as being most like ourselves. We soon discovered that by learning more about each other, there were other ways of being similar, rather than just what could be seen, such as common interests. Being able to share this balance of having certain things in common while being able to insert our own bit of individuality is what most kids can use to become strong, healthy friendships and forging friendships. Those who cannot find this healthy balance are often primarily affected by circumstances beyond their control, whether it be a negative home life, difficulty with learning, a disability, or some sort of challenge. This can cause a distorted perception of self.
30 seconds.
I'm sorry. Which often leads to inadequacy. The negative effects of this during childhood can cause some to compensate by drawing into themselves. Often these children are timid, shy, or afraid. This introversion can be a way of the child being able to have some control over what others are able to know about who they are. Other children who are affected by circumstances and imbalance will compensate by preying on those who they see as being weaker. Doing so gives this child a sense of control.
Time.
Okay, I'm sorry I couldn't finish, but I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have anything any written material you wanted to share with us?
I do. I was going to give you a copy of what I have and how we hope to help by interacting with children in the school system.
All right.
If I can pass it out.
Okay, Ms. Wilson will come take it
Thank
from
you.
you. Thank you very much.
appreciate it. Thank you for your
Mr.
time.
Walker, thank you. Okay, and Cheryl and Scott Lage, did I say that correctly? Close enough. Well, be sure and correct me when you get up here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Respected members of the Richmond Public School Board, we are Scott and Cheryl Loggy, the proud parents of
Loggy,
2
wow.
RPS seniors, and we're here to address 2 inequities discovered by our children during their college application process. First, there are still issues with the transcript accuracy at RPS. We reached out to Mr. Hostetter, and thankfully he corrected our family's errors. Now maybe we're the only family in RPS to receive erroneous transcripts. Or maybe there are students and families throughout the school system still receiving inaccurate transcripts. But how many families will be as lucky as we to discover and fix these errors before the end of the college application session? So based on the recent transcript controversies of 2018 and 2019, we're calling on the board to enact an immediate system-wide audit of the current transcripts for all RPS seniors. All students deserve to have full confidence in the accounting of their academic achievements, and their families deserve the right to trust in the official transcripts of RPS. The second inequity discovered during the college application process involves changes to RPS Policy 5-6.3 to no longer average middle school grades for high school level courses into students' high school level GPAs, a much needed and appreciated putting of RPS seniors on equitable footing with other seniors state and nationwide. However, this change has caused an unfair consequence by creating 2 groups of high school students, freshmen and sophomores whose middle school grades do not affect their high school GPAs, and juniors and seniors whose middle school grades do affect their high school GPAs. Mr. Cameron explained to us that there are winners and losers in every policy change, and that some seniors will benefit by retaining the middle school grades, just as some GPAs will be hurt by their inclusion. We believe this is a false choice. We believe strongly no student should end up on the wrong side of a well-intended policy change. These middle school grades impact student GPAs, class rank, college applications, and scholarship opportunities for better and for worse. If this policy change was designed to improve RPS, then all students should benefit from it. So we are calling upon the board to immediately amend the policy to allow current RPS juniors and seniors to opt into the updated standards. Students deserve the choice to accept their qualifying middle school grades as is, or to pass fail credits for their qualifying middle school grades. Expediency is imperative, as current seniors are in the final days of the college admission and scholarship process. This is a fair and simple change that puts all RPS high school students on equal footing and offers every senior the opportunity to benefit from their hard work.
30 seconds.
In closing, we request that the board enact an immediate review of transcripts system-wide to ensure accuracy and accountability, and to revise Policy 5-6.3 to allow juniors and seniors the right to opt in to the current code, if they so wish, while there is still time to impact their college applications, merit-based scholarships, and class rankings. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you. There is some seating in the front section. If some of you standing in the back would like to come up to the front. And in the meantime, if you are looking to address the board, now is the time for you to line up and come sign in.
Good evening. Superintendent, Chair, and members of the school board. My name is Carmen Foster, and I am an educational historian. I'm also very proud to be an RPS graduate, as well as several members of my family. I'm also a member of the Richmond chapter of ASALH, which stands for the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. I'm here to support the school board budget. In particular, there's an item that deserves support and attention as we look at priority 4 in your strategic plan, which is action item 4.7. That's about Richmond history. That's about partnering with local historical organizations as well as Richmond residents of all backgrounds to develop a set of student and staff learning experiences, including a credit-bearing high school course on the unvarnished history of Richmond. Last year, in 2019, was the 150th anniversary of Richmond Public Schools as we know it, with budgetary support from the City Council. This year marks 2020, the 150th anniversary of the Commonwealth public school system. The Richmond public school system has a remarkable legacy from Reconstruction through Jim Crow through the Civil Rights era, which I dare say continues as a 21st century version of that struggle for equality, equity, and investment in the future of our Richmond children. After you enter the National African American Museum of History and Culture and you time travel down the elevator, you will notice that there are stories that unfold regarding before the transatlantic slave trade. You see a powerful quote by the eminent historian John Hope Franklin, who says, "We must tell the unvarnished truth, not only for the nation, but for the city of Richmond, our counties that surround us, for our children and our grandchildren from all cultural identities. We have to recognize that we are all heirs of this unvarnished truth of our community history. And it's our responsibility to share the insights, the wisdom, the honesty about our difficult, fractured, complicated legacy, but also about the courage and the fortitude, character, and commitment of unsung citizens who represent the story of Richmond. Learning experiences that are culturally relevant, that create spaces for dialogue and discernment, not that just focus on Richmond's history, but engage students, teachers, and staff in critical thinking discourse will
30
ultimately
seconds.
equip them to navigate 21st century challenges. History is not a single subject, it's interdisciplinary. And it's up to us to make sure that our children, our community, and the surrounding area recognizes this important point that you have in your strategic plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ridgely Carter. I'm a 5th grade teacher at Woodville Elementary School, and like she said, I'm a proud graduate of RPS as well. I was coming today to speak on behalf of the home visit program and just in support of it. I participated in the pilot last school year, and the benefits have been outrageous. It's been great. We're doing it again this year, but I wanted to speak on last year that within my classroom, I saw so many changes within my students. One family in specific, I went over to visit, and I didn't realize her grandmother was on hospice, and other, things were going on in the house with the dynamic. And the mom was so grateful. She even got teary-eyed. She appreciated us coming over and just kind of breaking that barrier, because she didn't really know how to approach education because she didn't have a great experience and things like that. But I am 5th grade, so a lot of times we talk about middle school and other opportunities for secondary. And it was also another family that had a father that was in the home, and he was just going through some things and needed some resources. So we were able to help him as well. And then we also saw some changes in some test scores with data because the students said that they felt more comfortable, you know, with certain subjects and talking to me about things and asking for help. So I just wanted to let everybody know that the home visit program has been very beneficial and I support it 100%.
Thank you, Ms. Carter.
Testing. My name is Malcolm Solomon, a victim of an unjust ban that was placed on me a year ago. I will be representing testing. I will be representing Rural Center of Learning. I'm sure by now the people on the board are well aware of the matter I've come to speak against. The school board's silence and lack of response to an unjust ban demonstrates their tacit endorsements of the racist practices and behaviors within this school system. The people are listening and witnessing precisely how you will respond when a constituent of your district presents and represents a conflict and hopes for it to be corrected. And what I'm sure that they have noticed is how evasive you will become to avoid dealing with the problem, as if procrastination will make the conflict, the obligation we must undertake, disappear. There is an intentional systemic effort to remove black personnel from Chimborazo Elementary, an effort that resembles the racist practices of the judicial system. You're hearing this from a former employee, a District 7 constituent, a highly qualified and certified school teacher and administrator. Yes, I speak towards the unjust ban recommended by the principal of Chimborazo, but my case isn't unique. There has been other black males and females pushed out and replaced by their white counterparts without care. And I'm sure each of you are aware of the benefits of black students learning from black teachers. However, I'm not sure the Northern Virginia administrator cares to know. Was he brought here to systematically remove non-white employees so the school can reflect his previous district or suit his comfortability? As a former employee at this school, it was not hard to tell when you were being judged and treated differently. During my employment under this leadership, I watched powerlessly as black personnel were removed from Chimborazo Elementary despite their benefits to the school and student body. A black male tutor who worked diligently with the students delivered small group instruction was removed during the middle of the school year. Another case deals with a black female who understood the psychology of the students and worked as a one-on-one counselor to help alleviate students' past and current traumas, also removed mid-year. A second grade black male teacher resigns after his first year in the classroom. These systemic efforts are no different than the systemic efforts that lead to mass incarceration. We often hear stories of non-whites being incarcerated unjustly for crimes they didn't commit, then released after valuable time had been taken from them. One story is of Aaron Wallace, who becomes a lawyer litigating cases for other incarcerated men while fighting to reverse the life sentence he served for a crime he didn't commit. Another wrongful conviction is in the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal, a journalist who'd been on death row for 30 years and sentenced to a life of imprisonment without parole. The correlation here is the same injustice in which Aaron and Mumia experience with the judicial system, I'm experiencing with Richmond Public Schools, ignored by a system that's in need of qualified educators while simultaneously losing precious time. If we are to push the agenda to recruit and retain more black male teachers, then the approach shouldn't be to ignore the ones at your doorstep, but highlight their talents while assuring them they will not be governed by despotic administration. As I conclude, I would like to leave you all with the truth suggested in Mamiya's writing, in hopes the board will not continue to make the same mistakes of the past. He reminds us that to move clearly in the present, we must understand the burden of our past. Thank you all for listening. Solomon, peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Cameras. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I will be very short. I am Harold Fitcher. I'm President and CEO of Communities and Schools of Richmond, and we have the pleasure of working alongside the team at RPS to serve the young people in Richmond. And as many of you know, I have had more than a few years of experience working with young people in the city. And what I have learned is that the trauma, the social emotional, the ACEs issues that are coming up in the city are growing every single year. So I'm here today to support the effort of the superintendent with his budget and to increase the number of social workers that are in the schools. What I believe after all of these years is that if we don't deal with the social emotional issues that young people have, we will never be able to achieve the academic successes that they are capable of doing. I think it's a simple thing. We have to take care of those basic needs. And one more step in that direction is in the superintendent's budget with the social workers in addition. In communities and schools, we work alongside of them all throughout the year. And the more bodies that we can put on the ground together to service those young people, the more likely we are to see the academic success. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Good evening. I'm Robert Bowling. So, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board, and Mr. Cameras. As many of you know, I am the CEO of Child Savers, a agency that focuses in on the well-being, the mental health well-being of children and early care and education. And we enter into several different partnerships with the school system to improve the quality of education for our children. But tonight, I'm not going to speak from the Child Savers Force, but rather as a member of Brothers United, a mentoring program in Richmond Public Schools that I joined about 8 weeks ago in early January. And the program calls for African American men to enter into schools and to spend time with young men in those schools. I have a delightful young man that I work with who's a third grader at Woodville Elementary School. And the best way to really describe the impact of the work is through a story. So I'll tell you a very quick story. I met this young man in early January, and the first thing he told me was that he was going to go home and fight the entire weekend, and that he was going to beat up all of his classmates and all of his school members. And we talked a lot about that, and actually it was another another third grader who came over and entered to the conversation and helped calm him down. But since that time, it has been a wonderful and delightful experience with this young man. I go there on Friday afternoons to have lunch with he and his classmates, and I always try to find time to pull the young man away from the class and just to have me time with him, because he said to me, "I just want to be with you." And what we know, research supports that a caring adult in the life of a child can really change the trajectory of that child's life. And so last Friday, he decided he wanted me to tour his school. So he walked me down the hallway and he showed me every grade level hallway in Woodville. He took me to the library, and then as we approached his classroom on the way back, he stopped and showed me a display of artwork and kids' projects. And one of those was his. And you know what he wanted to be? A poet. And so we have decided, I have a journal book that I carry with me all the time, and I bought one for him. And so every time we meet, we're going to journal. And he's going to write and write and write and write. And soon, I believe, we will be reading Ahmad's poetry. So I hope that you will continue to support the Brothers United program. I am one of several mentors in schools and will continue to do that work. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Ann Forrester, and I teach 7th and 8th grade ESL, or English as a Second Language, at Bouchel Middle School. The students I teach are predominantly newcomer students, which means they have lived in the United States for 12 months or less. I'm here today in support of the proposed budget and the addition of 10 new ESL teacher positions, the continuation of both RPS Welcome Centers because of how much they help my students and their families, and additionally, I'm here in support of the proposed newcomer academies and what that would mean for my students. When I started to write down what I would say before you today, I tried to think of one singular story or one single student that encapsulates the situation I see in my classroom every day. But the truth is, there are just too many stories to tell. There's the child who never went to school before coming to the U.S. in 6th grade, or the 7th grader that is loved and cared for by an uncle that is his only relative in the U.S., and that uncle is desperately fighting to keep custody of him and keep them together. Or the 6th grader that needs counseling but doesn't get it because of overworked support staff. Or the student that quietly does all of her work to perfection despite being in a noisy class of 32 students, and she doesn't get the attention she needs or deserves. I could go on, and I know my class size and caseload will continue to grow as more newcomer students arrive to our schools, I'd say on a weekly basis. These students enter our classrooms and our country through no choice of their own, and their needs are very diverse, just as they are. The proposed 10 new ESL teacher positions, as well as the Welcome Center and those resources and the newcomer academies, and really all of the items pertaining to English learners, are desperately needed and imperative in order for RPS to continue the progress we have been making in meeting our English language learners' needs. High-quality language instruction and adequate social-emotional support services for EL students has been shown to improve academic outcomes and language proficiency. I urge the school board to continue to make progress in improving the educational outcomes for English language learners and adopt the proposed budget items for English language learners. Thank you.
Good evening, Superintendent, Madam Chair, school board members. My name is Andy Brauer. I'm a first grade teacher at Broad Rock Elementary, and I'm here to advocate for priority 3 of the current budget, and that is called the Safe and Loving School Culture. In 2020, we worked on our school's trauma-responsive efforts, and I was a member of the Trauma-Informed Care Task Force. This year, we're working on adding high school counselors and social workers, and I just wanted to talk about how important that is to the school culture. This priority is essential to creating a safe and productive learning environment. By increasing our commitment to a safe environment for our students, we will improve learning for all of our students, not just those who require extra care or extra attention. A safe and loving school culture also benefits teachers and staff by allowing them to do their best in an atmosphere free from stress and anxiety. I am a former naval officer and done a lot of things before I became a teacher, and I used to think that this kind of stuff was touchy-feely hogwash. And I can tell you that in my classroom, I started with a very good class, and I was given some challenging students because they couldn't work in other classrooms, and I became overwhelmed. And my ability to use restorative thinking and mindfulness was stretched to the limit. If I had additional school counselors and social workers and behavioral therapists in my building to come to my aid when I needed it. Not only would it benefit the students who are requiring the attention, the rest of my class would then get an afternoon or a day of regular teaching because I am not focused on those other students. The counselors, the aides, the CIS workers that we have, child saver people, they're all so important to us. So I'm here to say, keep focusing on priority 3 because a safe and loving school culture is what all of our students need. Some of them need it a lot more than others, but everyone needs it. And if we can provide that for our students, it will create a better atmosphere for our teachers and keep them being able to do mindful teaching and restorative processes in their classroom.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the school board. My name is Renee Bowers, and I am a 3rd grade teacher at Brauer Elementary. I am here tonight to speak about Priority 2 of Dreams for RPS, skilled and supported staff. As we move forward through the budget process, if there becomes a time that cuts have to be made, I urge you to keep skilled and supported staff a top budget priority. Recruiting and retaining skilled staff members deeply impacts all of our students and staff. Substitute teachers, teachers for English language learners, school counselors, social workers, and behavior specialists, just to name a few, are vital to my classroom instruction each day. In a school of over 900 students, there just isn't enough support staff to truly support our kids in the ways that they need. Our ELL teachers are supporting over 60 students at a time, and our 2 school counselors and 1 behavior specialist tried their hardest to assist the over 45 classrooms that we have at Broad Rock. And if a teacher needs a day off for a sick day or a mental health day, there usually isn't a substitute to support us, leaving the rest of the classrooms to absorb extra students. We desperately need more staff in our schools and to make RPS a desirable school division to stay in for the long haul. Our kids deserve better, and I believe in the work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. My name is Raquel Van Ness, and I'm an ESL teacher at Brauer Elementary School. I work with 2nd and 3rd grade students. And I'm here tonight to kindly ask that when the time comes to make the tough decisions on the budget, that you make priority 2 of Dreams for RPS your top priority. With over 60 students on my caseload, I cannot offer all the support the classroom teachers need from me. I also cannot offer the support my students deserve. I would love to say that I'm an exception, but unfortunately, this is the norm. As my colleague mentioned, in my school with over 900 students, we have 2 counselors. That's 450 students to 1 counselor. We also have 1 behavior specialist. That's 900 students to 1. Before ESL, I also taught Spanish in elementary school, and as part of the resource team, we saw over 800 students every single week. We had 6 classes back to back, with sometimes class and a half. And I honestly believe our students deserve better. So I ask you to give them that opportunity because we want to serve them better. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brandon Love. I'm a 21-year-old spoken word artist, published author, and overall community advocate and youth leader born and raised in Southside Richmond, Virginia. I would love to speak on myself. I even wrote a speech that I was going to deliver for you guys today. But being that I'm here speaking on behalf of the youth, standing in line, I chose to say, what would the youth do? And the youth would tell you the truth and they would speak from their heart. So I'm here on behalf of Brothers United, and most importantly on behalf of our young African-American males of Richmond Public Schools. Like I said, growing up in Southside Richmond, I grew up with a temper out of this world. I saw so much things, you know, from drug abuse to family problems. And I know for a fact, without mentors, without somebody that looks like me, without a reflection, somebody to guide me during those dark times, I would be either in jail or dead right now. And that's the honest truth, as kids would say. So I'm here again, fighting for Brothers United. In psychology, we speak on, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a college dropout, I'll be honest with you. But we speak on in psychology, the mirror image effect. And so the idea of the mirror image effect is you're more likely to take some information or gather some information or just receive something or more comfortable with talking to somebody or venting when the person looks like you or looks like something that you wish to look like. In 2020, we have so many different role models on the touch of a phone, Instagram, YouTube, music. But the idea is to put positive male role models in those young men's lives. I wouldn't say that's the only way, but that's the amazing way. I know my mentee, his name is Dale. He goes to Oak Grove. The day before I met him, he told his grandfather, he said, I hope I have a young black man. I hope I got a young black man as my mentor. And so the Pops, I call him Pops, he told me that the day I met him, and that just showed me the impact and the necessity of not what I need to do, but this is actually what the kids want. This is what the kids are asking for. This is what the young black males in our city are asking for. They're asking for representation. I mentor kids all around the city. Bouchard, Albert Hill, John Marshall, Huguenot, the list goes on. And every time I go to schools, they ask, I need a representation of something that looks like me. I need somebody that walks the same walks that I walk, has the same shoes that I wear, you know, the same mentality, the same hair, the same passion and emotions, the same pain and anger and rage. And so, wow, this is amazing. I know my heart was racing before this, but I do appreciate you guys listening. And again, I just say, think about our young people, because I do it every day when I wake up in the morning. Because I know that every time I look at them, it's like looking in the mirror. It's like looking at myself. And as we always say when you see a young person, oh, I wish I had somebody to tell me this when I was your age. And so again, having somebody that looks just like them and has walked the same paths they have walked, it's powerful beyond measures. Again, my name is Brandon Love, 21-year-old published author, spoken word artist, and I'm here for Priority 4, Brothers United. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Peace.
Good evening. My name is Ben Campbell, and I came to speak about one thing, and I'm going to speak about something else. So the something else is this. In 4 years with the Armstrong Freshman Academy, we learned one thing, which is that the first thing for high school success is social and emotional stability for a young person. That is it. And if we don't deal with that first, we don't get to the second. It is true for the individual, and it is true for the classroom. This is a school system that is really beginning to dedicate itself to that, and it has to happen more. We all know it. So thank you for that work, and thank you for these programs that are being discussed tonight. The thing I came to speak about is we do have a real Richmond history course going on. It is probably due today in its final form. I don't know who was supposed to receive it. It's been worked on for about a year. Richmond is a physical history classroom. Within a mile of here, you have everything from where John Smith first came up the river with Christopher Newport on May 24th, 1607, to the place where the final work on the American Constitution was done, to the place where the American Declaration of Independence was proclaimed, and the place where it was denied. All of this right here, the largest slave market on the East Coast, and some of the greatest stories of achievement and liberation physically right here. And this course is being tried this next year. It's been developed. It's exciting, and it's path-finding. It's a special thing, and I want to thank you for doing it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Christopher Wall, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Brothers United. And I would like to speak to you like how I present myself at Miles Jones Elementary, and that's like this. And there's many reasons why I wear the crown, and a lot of people ask me about the crown, but with Brothers United, this gives me an opportunity to to be a role model for those young black males, to see something they've never seen before, to touch something they've never touched before, and to aspire to be something they've never been before or thought to be. No one thinks about it. This crown is a symbol to them. When they come and they see me at Miles Jones, they just, hey, King, hey. And I started out with one child, but now I got a little tribe. So it's like, all right. And we get a chance to talk to them and help them throughout little conflicts and things about their lives. They get a chance to expose them to different opportunities and see different sites. We went to Channel 12, we explored the whole news theater and where that was produced. We've been to a couple of fun places, you know, go play some laser tag and jump around, but it gives us the opportunity to have that intimate relationship with a child and play. And when they invite you into their world and play, it's a wonderful thing, because then they start to open up about everything else. They want to tell you, oh, I want to tell you about this, I want to tell you about that. And we get an opportunity to help and shape and mold that one child, but it starts to affect everybody else throughout it. I've been asked to come to different schools with the crown on, just to walk around and say hey to the children and spend some time with them, and I'm seriously considering it. But it is a great opportunity, and I want you to just continue to think about Brothers United. You'll hear some more speakers, some better than me, but definitely think about Brothers United when you think about your budget. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Harry McGee, and I'm a proud product of the Richmond Public Schools. And I'm also a mentor for the Brothers United program. I want to express the importance of this program because it helps to plant positive seeds in the lives of our young kids. On my first activity with my mentee, we had lunch together. And immediately upon sitting down, we were surrounded by 5 other kids that wanted to become a part of the program. The only question they had for me was, Harry, they call me Mr. Harry, can you be my mentor, or can you get a mentor for me? That's all they wanted. I didn't have any money to give them. I didn't have any pizza to give them. I didn't have anything to give them. I'm not a famous athlete. I'm not an actor. I'm not a rapper. I am just a citizen that wants to give back to the community that I love. And the only thing that these kids are asking for is for someone to take some time to love them, to learn them, to know them, and to give them some respect. And I ask that you continue to fund the Brothers United program. Let it be bigger and better, because there are a lot of seeds out there that we need to plant. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Shannon Wynn, and I teach at the Marvelous Miles Jones. I teach 3rd grade. Good evening. I'm here in support of the home visit program and to request that you continue to fully fund the home visit program. During my home visit journey, I have noticed an increase in student engagement and participation in classroom, which positively impacts their academics. Because of the home visits, there's a collective understanding of how important education is. The student sees that together we care about their education and their future, and they in turn work harder in the classroom. One of my students wanted to share her experiences and feelings about the home visit program, the brave Mrs. Aria Woody.
The home visits program helped me in the classroom. When my teacher visits my house, it feels like I can trust her more because it helps my grades and I can ask her for help. My teacher can also communicate with my parents to help them know how I'm doing. The home visits is fun to get to know my teacher, and she gets to know me more. For example, my teacher made me a pumpkin pie because we both like pumpkin pie. She has been to my house 2 times, and I hope she comes again.
Glory to God. Thank you. My name is David Jones, president and founder of the Georgia Foundation. First, I'd like to thank God for this day and all the other young kings that have came forth today. I hate to switch gears, but we're going to have to talk about something a little uncomfortable tonight that most people don't like to talk about, which is race and racism. I'm not afraid. I'm not scared. So do what you may, but we will discuss this tonight. Our Armstrong basketball team played last week and said they went through terrible things with N-words being thrown, and this, that, and racism being through all through the night. So I had got called, and I was like, Coach, what do we do? And their coaches all on RPS for sites saying the same thing. So if we as RPS, if the head athletic director of RPS does nothing, you're a part of it. You're a part of it. If you do nothing, if you don't go to VHSL and demand that something's been done about this, you're a part of it. Simple and plain. It don't feel good, but it's the truth. Second, you heard a bunch of men come up here and speak about mentors and who we are as black men in this community and in Richmond, Virginia. And I was laying in my bed and listening to the news as I was going to sleep, and when it hit me hard. I mean, it stung me. I was like, did he just say that? Most of these people on this board right here have children. Some have older children, some but have children. Could you imagine somebody telling your child that their identity is in a jacket, $100 Letterman's jacket? That's your identity? Who tells the child that, and then on top of it is a second or third place jacket? That is not your identity. That is not who you are. You are more than that. But when somebody that's in charge of you, your athletic director, tells you that, then tell it to the news, that 40-something young black men, they found their identity because they got a jacket? Unacceptable. Unacceptable. I cringed when I heard it. My wife touched me and said, did you hear that? If that's acceptable, we playing a game. That's unacceptable. That is not your identity. That is not who you are. So Superintendent, you can throw as much money as you want. Until that stops, nothing will change. Nothing will change. We got teachers. We actually want to pour money into teachers. Teachers are teachers, not disciplinarians. They are there to teach a class, not to discipline nobody. So when you put the right people in place, you will eliminate all of these things. Putting people in place that's going to lead young black men to where they know they need to be, giving them a vision that you are better than second and third place. Yes, hold your head up high, be proud, but you are better than this. You must go back, work hard so you can be number one. This must stop. This must change. And until we do, no matter what the budget is, nothing will change. Thank you.
Good evening, Superintendent Cameron, school board members. I am Pastor Marvin Gilliam. I pastor the Mount Carmel Baptist Church in Church Hill. I'm also a former RPS teacher, but I'm here today to speak about Brothers United Mentoring Program. After transitioning into full-time ministry from teaching here in the city, one of my primary goals was to be an advocate and still be a partner with our public education system here in the city. Being a mentor for Brothers United is one of the ways that has provided me an opportunity to influence the life of a young man here in our school system. In a few short months, I've seen such tremendous growth in my mentee. His name is Camille Gales. He's a third grader at Chimborazo Elementary School. He's energetic, he's athletic, he's intelligent, and he's shown a lot of growth just over this short period of time through this intentional investment of these one-on-one meetings and our group outings. I'll be honest, y'all, listen, the school year started kind of rough. It was a rough start for him and for us as we built our relationship. He was having conflict with his teacher. He really didn't want to come and listen to me a whole lot. Some of his classmates, he was having conflict with them as well, and he really wasn't reaching his potential academically. But I know and I'm confident that my presence there with him as a caring black man, he can look and say, okay, he keeps showing up, he keeps coming back, he keeps saying he's here to help me navigate these challenges. I know that that's helped him to turn around his behavior and his academic performance in class. And the coolest part about this experience is like another mentor shared tonight. Not only is Camille my mentee, but now his classmates and his friends and we've all created a bond over lunch and over recess. And he doesn't mind sharing me most of the time. I've been in the classroom with our students on the high school level, and I know what it is. And what I know is that we need more presence of our black men to mentor our black boys, and the earlier, the better. not just as classroom teachers and administrators, but also as community members who want to make a relational investment in the betterment of the lives of our young brothers and our little brothers here throughout the city. So my ask of the board today is simple. I implore you to ensure that Brothers United mentorship program continues to be a priority of the budget as a part of the Dreams for RPS strategic plan priority number 4, deep partnerships with family and community. What I know is that the African proverb is true. It takes a village to raise a child. Teachers and administrators, parents and grandparents, and caring members of our community make up the village for all of our students, and specifically the young men of color in Richmond Public Schools. We need Brothers United to expand the community impact and partnership in the schools, but also to expand the imagination of our young men as they learn and grow. Thank you.
Hi. I am here just to speak more about the need for teacher raises. My name is Emily Spencer, and I'm a teacher here in RPS. I came out tonight honestly because I'm tired. I'm tired of wearing red for ed. I'm tired of coming out to meeting after meeting after meeting, both school board meetings and meetings with the General Assembly. I'm tired of working 2 jobs and hoping that my paycheck will hit before my bills do, and the fear that hits when I get slammed with overdraft fees instead. Every month I feel like my bills go up a little more and I have to decide what I need to cut from my budget to make it stretch again to the end of the month. Been working in education for over 16 years and hold multiple degrees. I shouldn't have to work a second job to pay my bills. I know that the budget that's been proposed isn't perfect. What budget honestly is? But I'm asking you to keep raises for teachers and staff at the forefront when cuts have to be made. And yes, I'm sure that I'll be speaking to City Council on this as well, because let's be honest, it's an uphill battle, and I think we're all very well aware of that. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the school board. My name is Ariana Tricky. I'm a 3rd grade teacher at Swansboro Elementary School and a Richmond City resident. At Swansboro, I consider all of my students my children. I say this both out of love for my students and because I frankly cannot afford to have my own children on a teacher's salary. Between the cost of living in the city, providing roughly $2,000 worth of materials and supplies in my own classroom each year, and paying off my student loans, each year my husband and I are faced with the difficult decision to delay starting a family of our own. Since the governor's proposed budget does not include a teacher raise, it is absolutely critical that the city provides a 3% raise for teachers and all support staff, as well as a raise for custodians and bus operators. To do any less would be effectively giving us a pay cut when considering inflation. If I can't afford a family of my own, I want to at least be able to afford the rising cost of my small apartment in the city. Additionally, I am also urging you to fund the additional 10 ESL teachers for the district. About 25% of my students this year speak English as a second language. At Swansboro, the number of English language learners that we serve grows each year, actually each day. Tomorrow I have a new student coming from Honduras. But Richmond's ESL department is stretched extremely thin. The ESL teacher who serves Swansboro this year is split between 5 schools. Imagine the teaching and learning time that is wasted every day in traffic. We are failing our children who speak English as a second language each day by not giving them the supports they need to make adequate growth. We must support these students by ensuring that we have enough staff to meet their needs. Finally, as a teacher in a building that is 108 years old, in a classroom that's old enough to have a coal chute in it, I am also urging you to continue to fund programs like Bathroom Blitz and day-to-day repairs. My students deserve to learn in a classroom with blinds that cover the windows instead of the makeshift paper curtains that I taped up. They deserve a classroom where they can't feel the breeze from the closed windows and where wasps can't easily get in from the holes in the wood on the windowsills. They deserve a classroom where the plaster from the ceiling stays put and where the rainwater can't get inside to leak on our books and papers. Until Richmond can afford to build more new schools to replace the old and outdated ones like mine, Richmond better have enough money in their budget to not leave me feeling guilty each time a problem like the ones I listed arises. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Chanel Ebanks, and I am the, oh, sorry. Yeah. Absolutely.
12 new advanced placement and other advanced course teachers to expand equity. As a student currently enrolled in AP courses, this was very important because in past years, there hasn't been many courses to choose from. Now students will have more variety in choosing what they want to be challenged on. These AP courses will help students gain skills that will allow them to be competitive with other students and better prepare for college. In addition, I was so thankful to see funding allocated to address our buildings and infrastructure. The condition of our schools, both inside and out, directly impacts the learning environment and academic outcomes for myself and fellow RPS classmates. We are extremely grateful for the board for continuing to make this a priority. Lastly, the raise for teachers. There are many reasons why teachers deserve the raise that were just passed. They help students get to the next level so they are able to be the next doctor or lawyer or even the next teacher. Personally, my teachers have devoted their time to make sure that every question I have is answered. They make sure that I understand the material so that I will be able to pass my exams. After school, they provide us with more of their time to assist us even further. Ms. Minot, who teaches earth science, Ms. Bleem, who teaches art, Ms. Solarchek, who teaches history, Mr. Luna, who teaches African American studies, and Mr. Key, who teaches chemistry. They have all influenced me to be my true self by making sure that I ask those questions that I don't have the answers to, and most of all, they don't give up on me. I know there are more teachers like my teachers out there, and they all deserve the 4% raise. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Chanel Ebanks, and I am the Out-of-School Time Systems Coordinator for the City of Richmond. I have the privilege of working with a cross-sector group of partners championing out-of-school time system building right here in Richmond. The Richmond Out-of-School Time Alliance has convened to increase access to and awareness of effective, equitable, high-quality out-of-school time programs to close opportunity and achievement gaps to support long-term youth, family, and community success. This collaborative group, comprised of out-of-school time providers, nonprofit organizations, local philanthropy, the City of Richmond, and of course, Richmond Public Schools, works toward the shared vision of supporting families as they make the best out-of-school time decisions to support not only their unique family needs, but also the long-term vision of youth making a successful transition to adulthood. I'm thankful to be able to do this life-changing work with all of our partners, and especially Richmond Public Schools. And tonight, I'm particularly excited about the update that Dr. Harris will share in regards to the progress that the Out-of-School Time Alliance has made. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. So I am the last, and everyone's had to stare at my back this whole time. I just want to thank you, the school board members, and the Richmond Public Schools administration for all of your support. I'm Barbara Sipe. I'm the executive director of Next Up RVA, and we are a member of the Out-of-School Time Alliance and work with the City of Richmond and the school district and 50 community-based organizations as we bring learning enrichments into each of your middle schools across the city. We are now, with your help and support, in 5 middle schools as Next Up's model, in serving 726 students this year alone, connecting kids to learning enrichments that provide after-school academic supports, robotics programs, gardening programs, sports and wellness programs. We just partnered with your sports physical education department on the tennis programming and helping to get more kids into your tennis sports program. So just really exciting things happening in the middle school. Middle schoolers are very special. Would we agree? Yes, and as the parent of a middle schooler, I can attest to this each and every day. It is the second most critical period of brain development in our human lifespan, second only to the first 3 years of life in early child development. So in these middle school years, giving children opportunity to explore what they're good at, explore their interests, develop their talents is critical. And as we look at how middle school evolves over these next generation, as we look at the education system, to bringing more and more enrichments into the schools, is the right thing to do and is going to help put our children on the path to success as they enter high school and make their career choices. And we're really happy to be a part of that and your partner in doing that. I just want to say thank you to that. Thank you to you. Thank you to the administration for being such a great partner and helping to give more kids access to opportunity.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board? Please come forward at this time. And once again, we've got empty seats up here. You don't need to be standing. Come on up and join us. No? Okay. All right. Well then, we move on to Dreams for RPS. Okay, it's in it.
Good evening, Chairwoman Owen, Vice Chair Burke, Superintendent Cameron, school board members. I would like to give you a brief update and overview of Priority 4, Deep Partnerships with Families and Communities. 4.1 talks about our commitment to community teams. Just as a reminder, we want to make sure that in every school, there is a family-centered group that is inclusive of both the student and family diversity that makes up the school. As you remember, we pivoted our strategy a little bit because we wanted to take an asset-based approach. We knew some schools had existing PTAs but may need some technical assistance with their PTA. Some PTAs reached out to us and were doing great work but recognized some equity challenges that they were having and not being representative of their entire student body and inclusive of all families, and we've been able to support PTAs in that way. Other schools have said that we have a PTA, but we're really interested in this idea of a community team where a member serves on the PTA, but we want to have a diverse group of stakeholders, and we're going to work together to start something fresh. So it was really important with the 10 schools that we're working with to do a deep dive of the existing assets in the school and either work to launch a community team, and they can call it a Go Far Together team, their own version, Oak Grove community team, they named their own, or they may have taken an existing structure that they wanted to make stronger. So we are continuing to work with these schools. 4.2, you heard tonight from a young student about how powerful home visits are. Again, our original plan just in launching this, we had not done this as a division before, so we wanted to partner with people we knew across the U.S. who were doing this really well, and that was PTHV, Parent Teacher Home Visits, out of Sacramento. They had a similar population to Richmond, but more importantly, it was started from a grassroots orientation, and they worked with their education union, they worked with their school board, with community members and families to create a grassroots model of home visits. And that concept was very simple. It was that teachers and families come together in a unique setting to build meaningful and trusting relationships. We recognize that we need to do some pivots around this model. Right now, we started with our 10 schools after a successful spring pilot, just with teachers who were interested and wanted to be a part of the program. We wanted to help shift mindsets and have teachers really experience the power of a home visit. Now, as we pivot and think about the spring, we want to not only reach our goals that we set, which was 1,000 home visits, but we want to think about our strategy next year and what stakes we want to put in the ground for how we think about home visits moving forward. So, for example, do we want to say as a division, every preschool and kindergarten student will receive a home visit? But we want to think about those things as we move forward. So the springtime, we'll be launching our 100 Visit Home Challenge in all of our schools, as well as thinking about our long-term strategy. Priority 4.3 is our Welcome Center. Again, this is an instrumental resource that has become just staple in our community for families and community members to really support with registration and assessment. We've already hit our goals of doubling the capacity of the Welcome Center. And we have families, one of which, Mrs. Rivas, who comes to mind, who reached out to us. I think this was last week she reached out. She had attended workshops and we had built a relationship with her, but she was going through a very difficult time. She shared how in the middle of the night, her trailer had burned down, but luckily her and her 8 children were safe, but they had lost everything. So they linked up with us and our family support center, but her first stop was the Welcome Center. And it was because the staff of the Welcome Center have really done an excellent job of building trust with our communities, and a lot of communities who the school wasn't always very welcome, especially in our Latino community. So being able to rebuild that trust and then buffer and pass that trust off to schools has been incredibly important, and doubling the capacity here has allowed us to do that more with all of our families. 4.4, I don't think I need to say anything else about Brothers United. You heard from some of our mentors this evening. They have attended group activities such as the Harriet Tubman and Underground Railroad at the Children's Theater. They saw one of our Black news anchors, Anthony, who gave them a tour, but also we also have Latino mentors and Latino students. This is a program that really focuses on mentorship for students of color. We want to continue to expand that and think about how do we partner with other community-based, especially Latino organizations, to provide mentorship, as well as expand our mentorship for our young women of color. I'm happy to report that for our Brothers United, up until this point, based on our mid-year data, we're seeing about 11% decrease in our suspensions and also seeing our attendance increase. Customer service. We have held our intro sessions. Our most recent one was on January 17th. We had about 50 people attend, and again, our results are very strong with 98% of our attendees stating that the session was a good use of their time. So we are continuing to far exceed our goal, which we set as 80%. Front office staff have also shared their appreciation for the PD focus on them and their work. And again, this is not one-stop shopping. These are continued PD sessions. Family Academy, I'm happy to report we met our goal for our winter session of 200 families. A lot of that attendance was around our advocacy efforts as we advocated for our strategic plan and for more funding for our division. We are ready. In April, we'll be launching our end of March into April, we'll be launching our spring session where we partnered with PBS Kids, who are doing family STEAM nights, Fit for Kids, who are doing family fitness nights, RVA Financial, who are doing family financial nights, as well as we will continue working with our Latino Youth Academy. And then 4.7, Richmond History. I don't know if you saw the Richmond Times-Dispatch article who spotlighted our Richmond History course, but I am pleased to also tell you that as of today, the U.S. State Department has awarded us a grant to fully fund our augmented reality portion of the Real Richmond course. So we are excited. Masinyahu, under his leadership, they are deep into curriculum development, but we are excited about the work and the excitement that this is bringing to our community members, but also our teachers. And then lastly, out of school time. We have great partnerships, and as you heard, we are part of an RVA OST alliance, and that alliance, I'm excited that they've adopted some quality standards around out-of-school time programming that really sets guidelines for what quality means. Again, we're working with that group as an anchor organization, but we really want to focus on how do we continue to really get better at all students accessing the transportation they need, food services, security supports for after school. So those are some of the issues that they're continuing to work on. And then I'll just remind you that since 2018, we've been able to expand our after school slots by about 1,000 seats. So I'm confident being a part of this OST Alliance will continue to expand. And just in closing, I would like to share a quote by John Nesbitt. He said that the most exciting breakthroughs of the 21st century will not occur because of technology, but because of an expanding concept of what it means to be human. This is at the core of Priority 4. We are building relationships, we are building trust with our families, treating all families with dignity, but most importantly, making sure that all families know that they matter and they are the vital part to making sure that we achieve success in Richmond Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to take any questions.
Ms. Burke?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's a lot of information. You all have done extremely well. I am so excited about Real Richmond before even reading the article in the paper because of a meeting that took place at the Richmond Hill beforehand. In fact, there's going to be a follow-up discussion regarding Real Richmond. Can you elaborate upon who will be in the program, how they were selected, knowing that Richmond was found in Churchill, that surely one of the schools in the 7th District will be included. But, and I want to take the class too, sincerely, because what I hear thus far is excellent. Our students are real eager to hear more about it. I just want to make sure that our children, I know it's going to be an elective, correct?
Yeah, Masanyahu, who works with Dr. Epp, I'm going to have her share a little bit more.
And thank you so much, Dr. Harris, for all that you and your department. You all do very well, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you more.
Good evening. To answer the question, Mr. Israel is working with our history departments at each of the high schools to present the course to each teacher to see if we want to start with a teacher who's obviously passionate about the course and is excited to take on a new course. We want to offer the course, and we're also talking with principals about master scheduling. We're currently in that. So we want to offer the course at as many schools where there's an eager teacher who's ready to take on the program, and then work with principals to get that into their schedule. So we have not finalized the specific schools. We're starting with identifying the teachers who are most eager and excited to take on the course.
Ms. Burke. So this is for high school only, or for?
Yes, this course in particular is for high school. Keep in mind, our 5th grade social studies course next year, which doesn't require, it's not the same sort of approval process that we went through in our program of studies, but our 5th grade social sciences course is also a local history course, which will feed into this course into the high school level. So all elementary students next year will get some exposure to local history through the revision of our 5th grade course as well. But this is just for high school for 2021.
So it's an elective?
Yes, ma'am.
So how are we making sure that our students are aware once the schools are selected? Because if this is not required, which I understand, but it's so worthy, so worthy. So how do we make sure that our students have the opportunity for those schools that do have it?
Yes. Our history specialist, Mr. Israel, works very closely with all of our history department chairs, and those teachers at those schools will be doing targeted student recruitment so that we have at least one full section at every school where there's an interested teacher.
So you can be a 9th grader or a 12th grader, or you have to be?
Currently, there is no grade restriction on the course.
Excellent. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. I can report more later in the spring.
I look forward to hearing it. Thank you.
Ms. Cosby?
I have a question in regards to the Richmond history. So right now it's an elective, but how do we move towards making sure that it's a requirement? I think it's very important what's going to be covered, that people understand about Richmond history, that our young people understand about their African American history, their Latino history in this city. And so I think it's a groundbreaking course. I'm excited about it as well. And just, I get what Ms. Burke was asking. I just want to know, how do we transition to make this a required course?
Sure. I can get the more specific information, but I believe the board would need to adopt a policy that requires this course in addition to the state of Virginia graduation requirements and any additional requirements that a local board puts on the state graduation requirements requires the State Board of Education approval. So that is a little bit of a process, but we can certainly look to do that as we start this work, start the planning work for the 21-22 school year.
Exactly, right, okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Sapini?
Thank you. It's so incredibly interesting that we're talking about the history courses and so on, and I was very appreciative of having that resolution as far as equity, because when I read it, while I was very appreciative, I said, you know, I'd be even more appreciative if, not just in Virginia or Richmond, but certainly the country, to have it mandatory to have Black and African American history, because there would be no world without Africa. There would be barely even the United States without African Americans. And so we've talked about Brothers United and so on and so forth, which is great. But, you know, knowing about your history and looking in the mirror and say, yeah, you know what? Look at all these accomplishments that we've done, but nobody knows about it. Even as adults, if you don't seek out that information, you don't know it. So I think it's very important that we try to push for real history, a true history. You know, when I first read that resolution, I was like, wow. And then I said, you know, I was going to say something right after it was done. I said, you know, I'll wait for the equity piece because we're talking about equity. And we just kept talking about it. It's like, wow, this is the news of the day. And so I hope we take this time of reflection and really do what needs to be done to get that done. Because I think it's more than important, and it would speak volumes. And as Mr. Jones and many others have mentioned tonight, being able to see and, you know, all the accomplishments that Black people have done that were stolen from us is very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Cosby?
Okay, yes. I have another question, so outside of what we were talking about with the history. So as we, thank you. I think it was a very comprehensive report. However, I will ask that we get more information during one of our budget meetings. We did talk about getting information, more information about a line item that was that we approved in our budget, and that was for the teacher stipends for home visits. And we asked for some information in terms of where we're going, and I know you said that we're going to pivot and, you know, but the sooner rather than later, and I don't know if this has to be a board motion to receive this information or, okay. So what we had asked for before in terms of getting more details about the home visit program, specifically, you know, if we're going to pivot from the 1,000 visits, or will it be how many schools, how many families, that type of information. One. Second, with out of school time, I'm excited about it. And I'm glad that we are growing it. I remember when Richmond Public Schools started it with the middle school renaissance. It was probably one of the first in the region to do this. So, but would like to, at that time with middle school renaissance, the district was very fortunate to have what we are going to have now, which is a coordinator to look at this data. Because at the end of the day, we do want to see how it is impacting our students. And I always draw a blank, but I know you look at the ABCs with out of school time, and so we're looking at attendance, we're looking at behavior, and I think the C is classroom performance, right? C is what?
Course performance.
Course performance, okay.
Close,
Okay. And so would like to get some of that so that, I remember a council person some years ago said, you know, we have all of these partnerships in our schools, but yet some of these schools are still struggling. So when we look at, we have to be extremely intentional with out-of-school programs and delivery and all that good stuff. So I would like to start seeing some information, that type of data. That would be great.
Absolutely. We're working on that, and we'll get that to you.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Harris. Okay, now, Dr. Epp, update on Goal 3, academics.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you. Good evening, Board Chair Owen, Vice Chair Burke, school board members, Superintendent Cameras. I'm excited to talk academics this evening and want to provide you all on an update, on a partial update on our Goal 3 around student proficiency. Our Goal 3 addresses increasing student proficiency rates in reading, writing, math, science, and social studies across the board in grades 3 through 8, K2 and 9-12. We talked earlier this year at the late fall around our K2 data for with the PALS assessment. I also presented earlier this winter results in terms of PSAT scores for our high school students. And so tonight's presentation is for grades 3 through 8 in terms of their proficiency on the standards of learning assessments at the end of the year. The baselines that we set during our goal setting process was to increase student proficiency as measured on the SOLs in grades 3 through 8 by 2 percentage points. And the way we are currently tracking progress towards that goal is around our beginning of year and winter MAP assessment. We give the MAP assessment 3 times a year, the beginning, middle, and end of the year. You can scroll up, scroll, next slide. Thank you. The MAP assessment is a national assessment. It is a computer-based adaptive assessment, which allows the assessment to more precisely target where students actually are. It also assesses students' growth. Our students take the MAP assessment in grades 2 through 9 in reading and in grades 2 through 8 in math. They also take it in specific courses in both Algebra 1 and Geometry. While MAP is primarily used to determine the appropriate zone for student growth, and where the specific skills students need to grow in, MAP does also provide a projected proficiency score. And this is a very useful tool for us in terms of understanding how our students may perform in the spring. One thing to note though is the MAP tends to significantly under-project pass rates. So for example, last year the MAP projected a 41.8% pass rate in math, but our students achieved a 56% pass rate. Similarly, for reading, MAP projected a 42% pass rate, but our students achieved a 56% pass rate. So what this tells us, it is a conservative estimate of student projected proficiency. And when we're looking at how we are trending towards student proficiency, I find it helpful to look at year-over-year growth. So if we are year-over-year trending up, that means we can anticipate, hopefully, a higher overall pass rate on the SOL, if that makes sense. So the results I'm going to present to you tonight are based on the winter MAP, and we'll start with projected SOL proficiency by grade. And again, this is an imperfect measure, but it is the measure we have, and I feel like the year-over-year analysis at least tells us how we're doing comparatively from a year ago. The headline for our math projected proficiency is that at the elementary level, we've seen some exciting gains, and also in 6th and 8th grade. Overall, as a division, we are up 4% in terms of projected proficiency. You'll see that we're up 9% projected proficiency in 3rd grade and 8% in 4th grade. So We're very excited about some of these growth trends in math in particular. Looking at the elementary level in particular, we see some really promising trends with nearly every school, all but 4 to be exact, showing increases in projected math proficiency compared to this time last year. It's important to note that for some reason, we do not have Ginter Park baseline data. And last year, we've done a much better job this year monitoring participation in the map. So Ginter Park might be, it's hard to look at year over year, but overall, we're seeing almost all of our elementary schools showing year over year growth. And then looking at the subgroup by elementary schools, we're also seeing some promising data. Again, still a lot of work to do, but we are seeing improvement among several significant subgroups, particularly our Black students, our Hispanic students, our students with disability, our economically disadvantaged students, and our English learners. Going to middle school, we are seeing less overall growth in terms of our middle schools. We do have 3 schools that made notable growth: Franklin Military Academy, Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School, and Thomas Henderson Middle School. And division-wide, we did see, again, 4 percentage points of growth overall, but you'll see that at the remainder of our middle schools, Elkhart Thompson also had a small amount of growth. You'll see that there's some generally flat areas for middle school, so we're exploring what's going on there. Looking at the projected proficiency by subgroup, again, the growth is less clear here than in the elementary levels, but still some areas of improvement with our Black students and our students with disabilities and our English learners. There are some, we remain flat with our economically disadvantaged students, and we did see a slight decrease with our Hispanic students. So we're really trying to understand what might be at play for our middle school, but overall we see a net growth. Turning to reading, this is the projected SOL proficiency by grade in reading, and again, we see some promising growth in 3rd and 4th grade, and then we start to see a leveling off in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. We think the 3rd and 4th grade growth is attributed sort of 2 things. One, we've done a lot of work to revamp the structure of our literacy block, and this is also the year that we're implementing a sort of true intervention model, and I think it's the strongest at the elementary level because we've built in time for small groups and the like in a way that our middle schools and high schools have to get really creative with their schedules to find time for systematic interventions. Again, not the full explanatory factor, but one thing that is different between our elementary and middle schools. If we look at our projected proficiency by elementary schools, we did see, again, many schools increase projected proficiency year over year, with 18 schools out of our elementary schools being up. And then we have a small number of schools that are either flat or slightly down. And then if we look at this by subgroup, you'll see, again, some increases in key demographic areas, such as, again, much more work to do, but we're feeling optimistic about some of the growth. Again, not as dramatic as in math as we would like to see in reading, but our Black subgroup, our students with disabilities, and our English learners, as well as our economically disadvantaged group. Continuing on to middle school, by school, this is again where we see the results much more mixed. We had some strong gains again at Franklin Military, MLK, and Henderson, but the results across the other schools are taking a slight decrease. Looking at our subgroup data by middle school, again, this is generally down. And again, there's a lot of factors at play here that we're looking into, but each of our middle schools has a lot of different challenges to creating a dedicated systematic intervention block so that every student during the day gets targeted individual remediation. That is, we didn't start that. That's not as strong in the middle schools as it is in the elementary schools yet. We are addressing that, of course, during our master scheduling conversations. So those are our projected proficiency rates for the SOL based on the MAP assessment. Again, the headline here is the MAP assessment tends to be a very conservative measure. So our actual proficiency last year was much higher, and historically that is true, than the projected number. And we are seeing year-over-year growth in a lot of areas, and in particular in elementary math.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tracy, presumably because we're party to the MOU with the Commonwealth, we are regularly sharing this information with them. So can you speak to how this data relates to other jurisdictions across the Commonwealth, and if they are, what kind of year-over-year changes that other districts, particularly our neighbors, are experiencing? Sure. Thank you.
The MAP assessment is a locally administered assessment, so it is not a state-required assessment. So I do not have access to the other area divisions. Not every division gives the MAP. Many do, but I do not have access to that comparable data.
Thank you, Dr. Elk, for this report. My question for you, I'm looking at the middle schools because I see there is growth. We're seeing some growth, some improvement in our elementary schools, but in our middle schools, some of this data concerns me because I'm looking at Bouchard for an example. I'm looking at their information, but I'm looking at other middle schools, similar different demographics, challenges. Well, I don't like to say challenges, but create more opportunities to make change. What are some of the initiatives have you seen in the growth, such as Elcott Thompson? What's going on there to see that growth, but we're not seeing it in some of our other middle schools?
Well, so in math, we are seeing, we're seeing much more, we're seeing a clearer growth line for math in middle school. Not all of our middle schools, but most of our middle schools did grow some in math, just not as dramatically as our elementary, with the exception of Franklin Military. And again, we did overall for middle school grow. Reading, we saw obviously a little bit less of a promising trend. To account for the differences here, I mean, there can be a number of factors that range from the experience of the individual teacher teaching math or reading. So if we have a newer teacher in the building, that might be a factor. It might, as I said, I do think our middle schools, one of the things we're working on is making sure our middle schools have a common schedule across the division. And we talked about this last year. We need to create dedicated, consistent intervention and what I call individual support time. So students who need additional supports get it, but students who do not need that also have access to enrichment or extension activities. So, and that the extent to which schools have been able to create that space currently varies greatly. And so the schools that have been able to create space in their schedule for that remediation, intervention and remediation, I think we're seeing stronger gains. So that is the more universal explanation. With each of these in each individual school, our principal directors and our teams are having conversations with the principals to break down that data by grade and by teacher to figure out what might be happening within each respective grade level or classroom. So we could talk one-on-one. I'd prefer to talk one-on-one based on a deep dive of each of those schools. It's hard to summarize that school by school.
Yes, I totally agree, because I'm speaking about Bouchard. There's a decline where we're seeing a growth in the other middle schools, maybe not as much as we would like to see, but we're still seeing a growth.
So I would also want to look at breaking this data out, and we do this with principals, and I'm sorry I can't speak to this specifically to Bouchard tonight, but I can certainly follow up. For example, if this year Bouchard has a higher percentage of students at a lower WIDA level in terms of English language proficiency, that might account for a decline. If their student population shifted this year, that could account for it. So that would be something I'd be looking for. But if that's not the case, then we certainly, I know Mr. Jefferson and the team are talking with each principal about what they attribute either growth or declines to.
Yes, we can have this conversation offline, because this is very concerning.
We certainly never want to see the data going in this direction. We want to see it going in the positive
Exactly.
direction.
Ms. Burke, then Ms. Dorr, Mr. Brauer, Ms. Costa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. F. You know I love to see that, but I'm not a happy camper. I'm not a happy camper at all. I'm happy about Franklin Military Academy, and I like to see the gains there. But at this time of the year, to see our children making 40%, 45%, something is wrong. It goes back to the equity piece as well. It goes back to what I think we were trying to do with the rezoning piece. It's inevitable that Fox and Mary Montford and John B. Kerry's data would be different than with the Oklahoma print because of the social economic piece that's there. What my concern is, I have two questions. Number one, I thank you for referencing teacher experience, because that does make a difference. It goes beyond professional development. It goes beyond what the young man, I think, one person that spoke this evening, who was our student here, that spoke in terms of teachers staying after school on their own time and making things happen, but we can't mandate that. And I think that's a part of Franklin Military Academy's effort, because everyone from the principal to the teachers, they put it in after schools during the weekend, and they celebrate often as well. So as I look at schools such as Woodville, haven't moved a bit, but we still have a little time, but 21%, I said a little time in terms of gains we should make by the end of the school year. When I see 21%, January, half the year's gone, I know we're playing catch up. I know we're dealing with a lot of challenges. But I want to know, number one, what's in place? Not every child in the classroom is not meeting expectations. What is the acceleration and enrichment program for those students that are making a cut? Because as one student makes 10% or 20%, someone else in that classroom should be making 85, 95, 100%. So during that intervention period, what's in place to help those bubble children as well as those children that are beyond? And I'm not speaking of gifted and talented programs.
Sure.
I'm talking about the classroom 2 days a day. Because that's something isn't clicking. My thinking is that because of, and studies are in place to show this, inner city students are visual learners. Every young
Their cell phones are better than mine. Okay? They entertain themselves. Always the content of what they're looking at on their cell phones may not be aligned with what we expect for SOLs. But something here isn't clicking. So number one, acceleration and enrichment programs, what's in place to help those students to get over and above? And number two, what are we doing about those teachers that may not have that experience in place? And it's not just a professional development piece. It has to be hands-on. Do we have enough hands-on resources in the classroom? I'm not talking about technology. I learned math playing blackjack. I get the 21. Okay? So my question is, because you learn to make do with what you have. I don't like this 20%, 30%, and it's not your fault. But somewhere along the line, I know that you can do better. I know in my mind what our children can do, but something is not clicking here that we need to work on. And I know you all are working hard and long. I was just thinking that real Richmond, maybe our students will learn to, but they're in high school, this Williams to be elementary level, with the hands-on experiences and being on field trips and being in the community, then coming back to write about it, as the young man said about being a poet, come back and write about it or tell about it. Somewhere it needs to be more, what's the word? What is it? How do you say it?
Experiential.
Yeah, right. Okay. But do you see where
Yes, ma'am.
This is bothering me.
Yes, it is.
I don't like to be at the bottom of the river.
No,
I
and
don't like the East End being with
no.
It may be a whole new set of children, I don't know. So I'm gonna stop talking and ask you please, acceleration and enrichment, what is in place? Then another thought too, we have to be careful about, I'm on the road, we have to be careful about taking away programs that help children to excel. Who wants to sit in a classroom all day long without having other experiences?
Absolutely.
After a while, just like being here, after a while it's like, it is, because we have to get up and move around, so we also have to think as educators that we can't take away experience, we can't go on field trips,
Agreed.
have those hands-on experiences, go outside in the yard and pick the leaves from the trees. So something isn't, that's a wonderful math teaching experience. Do I need to come back to teach?
Well, we will never say no to that, Ms. Burke, but we would hate to lose you on this board. But yes, you are always welcome to model teach in any of our classrooms. Yes, ma'am. In terms of acceleration and enrichment for students who, at the elementary level in particular, during our core instructional time, there are multiple points where students are in small group instruction, which is based on their independent level. And so, for example, in the reading block, students have guided reading, which is based on their instructional level for reading. So students aren't getting a one-size-fits-all for reading instruction. So, for example, students who are on grade level or above are getting continued guided reading at those level of texts. They then also, during their small group rotations, get individualized time through our blended learning software like iReady or Dreambox. And then they also get time for independent reading. So during those times, students get that. And then there is, during our dedicated intervention blocks, those students might be getting like an additional book club. And again, that varies a little bit by school. So I want to figure out how that's happening in terms of the enrichment side. The majority, though, of our students in a number of these schools still require what we call a Tier 2 or a Tier 3 intervention based on this data as well as their PALS data. So during that intervention time, teachers as well as interventionists are working, and tutors are working with students based on their individual levels. So in a school like Woodville, the majority of your students are going to be getting that targeted intervention. The question is, why is that not moving the needle? And so that's something we're looking into to try to figure out what's happening there versus at other campuses where we are seeing movement. And I think in terms of in terms of elementary in particular, 3rd through 5th grade, this doesn't reflect one of the major changes we made this year was insisting on systematic phonics in the lower grades. So hopefully, when we present our PALS data for the lower grades, we should see some movement in the phonemic awareness area, in the spelling component. So this doesn't reflect that. But again, I think moving reading achievement is one of these things where we feel real urgency, but also know that once a student has fallen behind, it takes a lot to go back and replace some of those foundational skills. And this is the group of students that may or may not have had phonics, which is, as you know, as an early childhood educator, how fundamental that is. But we're digging into this data with our schools. And you had a second question about teacher experience. We do have a mentor program. We do believe that this is, when utilized well and rolled out well, this is where division-wide curriculum can be a really helpful support to teachers, because it's one less thing. They have to really internalize it, but it's one less thing to create from scratch. And so those are not catch-alls. I mean, we know as educators, we can shorten the learning curve, but we also know that getting teachers through that process and getting them lots and lots of coaching. And one of the things Mr. Hughes and the principal directors emphasize constantly is time in classrooms. So principals, APs, principal directors are in classrooms observing and giving feedback constantly. I was just with a group of our assistant principals who are in the Next Generation Leadership Academy, and they're all APs, and they talked about how they're in classrooms so much they don't have time to do other things. And I said, well, we'll take that trade-off. So I think we now need to look at how strong is our coaching and feedback models if we're in classrooms a lot. But I think we're trying to put in place a lot of things, but I don't have a magic bullet answer for you.
Ms. Dorr, Mr. Brauer, Ms. Cosby, and Ms. Page.
Thank you. I also think it's appreciate the level of granularity, because I think the headline could be that we're at 4% in math and we're at 1% in reading. Then when you dissect that by subgroup or by school, I think there's a lot to glean from this. So my question is related to some of the other questions around here. What do we consider to be statistically significant from a drop or an increase perspective? I assume it's 2%, given that that's our goal for this year. And then part of the point of looking at this mid-year is so that we can make corrections. And so what can we do as a board to help you make those corrections? Is it something in the budget? Is it something, is there anything that we as a policymaking body can do to support you in making these corrections mid-year?
On the statistically significant question, all of these types of assessments are, none of these are perfect measures. And so I do want to make sure that we also know that this is a projection, but it is not it's not a crystal ball. But given that our target is up 2 points and that this is typically a conservative estimate, we do believe that anything that is an increase over our target, we feel good about. Of course, given where we are, we want to see more rapid growth year over year because we have a far way to go for many of our students. In terms of what we can do at this point, one thing I know that our teachers spend a lot of time digging into this data at the student level, which is where it's the most important, because they get a student-by-student report of the specific skills that students are strong in and weak in. So they can create small groups for reteaching or review or things like that. And they can share that, they can create these sort of remediation structures with their teams. And then we're also working with principals to help them unpack this data. In terms of what the board can do, one of the main things is schools are launching across the board various extended day and Saturday academies to provide tutoring and additional academic supports for students. And that looks different at every school, but almost every school has that in place or is launching in the next 2 weeks. And so encouraging families and constituencies to get their students there to take advantage of that extra support is really helpful. Also, I know we're starting to head into the spring and we haven't had a break in a while, and so really encouraging strong attendance at schools. And I think just continuing to ask teachers what support do they need to be able to effectively use this information to support students. It's always helpful to have another ear.
Mr. Barlow, then Ms. Cosby and Ms. Page.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Dr. Epp. So I am curious to hear more about how we think the new curricula that we're going to be bringing in for both math and reading may impact student achievement. To what degree do you feel that our current curriculum in each of those subjects impacts this? And then the second piece I have for you is I'd like a little bit more detail about what we're seeing in middle school in particular. I know that you mentioned that some of there's some scheduling issues with respect to pulling students out and giving them more individualized attention, but I assume many of those issues existed last year as well. So given that we're seeing what appears to be fairly consistent trending downward in the middle school grades, I'd like to hear more about your thoughts there.
In terms of the curriculum itself, we're in the middle of a procurement process, an evaluation process for both ELA and math. And I do believe that first, whenever you're implementing new curricula, there's always, there can be implementation dips, and so as people are getting up to speed, the reading curriculum we're implementing now will likely not be the same curricula because we're adopting to be updated with current standards. But I do believe in our reading curricula, particularly in the elementary level, we will have similar components, right? So I hope that one of our big pushes this year was to get more clear on all the pieces of literacy and reading. And so teachers have had to learn a lot this year about all the different components that make up reading at the elementary level in particular. And so my hope is by going through some of those bumps in learning that we will be a little bit stronger regardless of the curriculum we adopt, because the same concepts we've been emphasizing around literacy will be consistent regardless of literacy program. In terms of math, the pilot, our Richmond math pilot, we see yielding some really exciting results. In fact, the 4 schools that did not make growth were the 4 schools that are not doing that pilot. And while we're not yet ready to say that the curriculum is the defining factor, we definitely are seeing some promising trends related to that pilot. So we're looking into that a bit more, and again, eager to see how this plays out over the course of the spring. In terms of middle school in particular, to be frank, I think this is a larger conversation that we need to have with our principals and middle school teachers to try to understand, what's at play here. But I do think this is where curricula that is adopted early and approved, we'll be bringing that to you all this spring, and on a timeline where we can share with teachers before they leave for the summer where we're going and what they can anticipate, which will give them time to get acclimated. We're hopeful that that will be have a positive effect, but I think curriculum alone isn't going to address some of these other factors contributing to middle school, and I'm just not ready to say what all of those factors could be.
Okay. Ms. Cosby, and then Ms. Page.
For Harry.
And then Mr. Young.
Thank you for this report. I do have a question about when we start talking about remediation. So, and you said, okay, a lot of schools are starting to have extended day programs and Saturday academies, and they're starting it now. Is this the time, have they had it before? When did they start? Are you?
It honestly varies across the division because we also integrate academic support into our OST programming. So some schools have that already underway, but as it relates to academic proficiency and schools having time beyond the school day, every school has or will be launching an after-school or Saturday program.
The reason why I asked that question is because, and I mean, I don't know, that's what I'm going to ask you, in terms of tutors being made available, when does that happen? You know, I have heard, I don't know, so you can tell us, that, you know, it's kind of happening now, it didn't happen before. So I guess I just feel like with certain things, we're kind of behind the 8 ball in terms of our timing. So when we start in the school year, in terms of tutors?
Tutors can start, tutors have started as early as September.
Okay, good, okay.
Every school has to submit a very specific plan for how they will use tutors. In the past, we didn't do that, and we were spending a lot of money without a plan, and they were doing all kinds of things.
Okay.
So funds are not freed until a school submits their plan, and our team is on hand to help schools with that. So given the various things happening at a school, and there are many things going on at a school, schools maybe, you know, some schools they've got other priorities in the fall, and they're really waiting until the winter and spring. So that would be the only holdup. And if you hear of holdup other than that, you should let me know.
Okay, no, I just know. So I
Yeah,
was like,
sure.
okay. And so, and given that, when we talk about teacher experience, so, and we've asked for this type of data at the board level, just by school, teachers who are, how many do we have who are 0 to 3 years, you know, 3 to 5, 5 to 10 or whatever, just to get a breakdown of experience that I think is helpful because, and I mean, this is gonna sound, you know, when I think about it too, I just think about from a policy perspective as well. Are there certain things that we have to look at in terms of policy and funding to make sure that, you know, we are supporting teachers? And I don't know if it's because at certain schools we have more new teachers than others. I mean, I don't know, but it would be good to see that data to analyze it. It might not be the case at all.
Absolutely.
But we would like that type of breakdown. I think this is another example of why this information has been requested. And I hope that we do receive it soon. And I just, Ms. Burke, I do have to say, and this is to the administration as well, when we talk about what we were trying to do with rezoning and all of that, I just have to say that it is not inevitable that our scores will be lower in schools that are facing socioeconomic challenges. I remember, and I used to talk about it, and we used to tout it, because you could look at in 2000 Shimbo scores, you could look at Fairfield scores. If I looked at Fairfield scores, this is back in 2006, 2007, 2008, if I looked at those scores, they would be the same. I couldn't tell. If I were just to look at scores, I could not tell the difference between Fairfield scores and Mary Mumford scores. I could not tell the difference.
Agreed.
So how do we get back there? And a lot of it I know had to do with they had dynamic principles, creating a culture, whereas you had people who were inspired to go above and beyond, right? And so, I guess I'm just saying that, you know, socioeconomic status, it is a challenge, absolutely, and I will, you know, but it is not a preventive measure in terms of us seeing greatness in our students that's reflected in these scores.
I couldn't have said it better myself. 100% agree. And all the more reason that we have to ensure that our students have the foundational skills they need, particularly our students growing up in low socioeconomic environments.
And finally, Ms. Owen, thank you. We have to look at, so the data about our teacher experience, and also look at this mentoring program. As Ms. Burke said, you know, classroom, hands-on, touching, and if we have to go back and look at revamping this mentoring program, I know I've said it before in other meetings, that's critical, I think, especially if you have new teachers. How do we make sure that they are supported? And let's say even if we have experienced teachers too, and who might be doing something different, making sure that they are supported, but not just the theoretical, you know, you just go to a PD and then you come back and you try to figure out, how do I apply this to my situation or my classroom and my classroom dynamics? And I think that's very important.
Thank you.
Before Ms. Page, Mr. Cameron wants to say something.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I did want to just build on what you were saying, Ms. Cosby, and celebrate some of our highest poverty schools. I'm looking at elementary math in particular that have some really substantial and impressive gains. Chimborazo up 6 points, Fairfield up 9 points, George Mason up 9 points, Carver up 6 points, and so couldn't agree with you more that our goal is to get a place where Fairfield and Mumford, you can't tell the difference. I did, as we are very self-reflective, I also want to celebrate a lot of these schools that are working very hard to make the growth, despite the challenges that they're facing. Certainly, there are places that are not doing that. We talked about Woodville. But I do think it's very encouraging to see some of these elementary schools making those gains despite the odds, as you said.
Page, and then Mr. Young and Ms. Burke.
Okay. Dr. L., thank you for sharing information, what can the board do to support, to better advocate, whether it's policy, but I mean, thank you for that information, because I know you all are working hard, our teachers are working hard, but some of my colleagues made that point about the experienced teachers, because skill set, that has a lot to do with it. And then when you look at the numbers, and you said something, I think is a correlation with maybe not a solid foundation in the elementary level, and then it has just, because it wasn't really addressed then, it still exists and is carried over to middle school. I mean, when you look at the scores, I agree with Ms. Burke. We gotta do better. But I think it's really important when we talk about the literacy, those fundamental programs, concepts, core subjects on the elementary level, I think is really critical. We got to really, really drive home literacy, math, that reading comprehension. It makes a difference, because if we starting behind the 8 ball when we start school and we're not putting in the right support, it's just going to carry over.
And this is where, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't put a plug in for part of the budget around our reading and math, our reading specialists, particularly at the middle school level. if you're a middle school teacher, you're not necessarily trained. If you're a middle school reading teacher, you're not necessarily trained in supporting struggling readers or readers who are coming to you 4 or 5 grade levels behind. And you really almost need your best elementary person supporting reading instruction at the middle school. And again, there's ways that we can fix that in terms of getting teachers training. I think sometimes we need to train teachers for what middle school instruction needs to look like or support teachers there, but middle school teachers need coaching and support from a true reading expert that understands how you help a 13-year-old who is reading on a 3rd grade level. And that's a totally different skill set than an 8th grade reading teacher.
And then my last question. So what is the frequency that you all review the data, individual students, subgroups? What's the frequency?
Well, I believe many of our schools are doing this on a weekly, if not, bi-weekly basis, be it student classroom-based formative assessments. We have unit assessments that are built into our curricula. So schools do a lot, teachers and principals do a lot of analysis there. At the division level, we are looking mostly at what we call SGA data, which is a sort of, or interim data. And so, as I shared earlier this year, we are not where I want to be in terms of our assessment infrastructure to make sure that we have consistent, common assessments across the division on a more frequent basis. But we want to take away assessments so that teachers aren't and students aren't over tested. So we're currently in the process of working on our assessment calendar now. And teachers will have a chance to give feedback on that assessment calendar to make sure that, when we look at the assessments and the data available in some, it's on a frequent enough basis, say 6 or 9 weeks, that at the division level we can analyze and provide supports instructionally. But I do know at the school level, teachers and principals are looking at this on a regular basis. Again, I think the detail and the extent to which that is happening does vary greatly based on the school and the leadership capacity and what they have time for. I do know that our teachers continue to struggle with having enough time to plan and do data analysis. But at the division level, I would say every 9 weeks, we have some form of data to analyze. So we're in what we call our SGA season. And so we're in the process of analyzing that data right now.
So if a principal does not submit their plan for, the remediation support, does red flag? Okay, why haven't you submitted?
Yes, and we start with support. We start with support first, and we're in the middle. For example, we're wrapping up our 2nd round of site visits around our intervention efforts. And so our principal directors will work with Mr. Hughes and our principal directors, my team will, to outline schools that are still struggling to get those things in place to figure out what support or oversight is needed. But we start with support, and that's really what my team's function first and foremost is.
Okay, thank you.
Then Ms. Cosby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, Tracy, I just want to convey my gratitude to you and to your team. I know you're working really hard. That's been shared a couple of times. Second, I just wanted to acknowledge what you just said. Yes, absolutely, on balance, our folks need to be spending their time on instruction, not data analysis. But third, I do want to, Liz inquired a moment ago what we can do collectively to provide support to you, and I convened this round of inquiries by asking about some other school districts in the region, perhaps, or around the state. And I do invite staff and board. I think it's really important, and I understand perhaps not every district leverages this mid-year check-in, for lack of a better description, map. But my experience has been, though there's a lot of variance, at the risk of stating the obvious, there's a lot of variance from district to district as it relates to your SOL results and the final scores. Year over year, trends. There's a lot in common, it seems, across the Commonwealth as it relates to year over year and particular subject matter, for example. So while perhaps maybe some school districts would be reticent to share that mid-year check-in with us, my 2 cents would be that that is a control variable for us, or a control variable. I'd love to test what we're doing vis-a-vis some other district and see where they're at. So just 2 cents.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a couple of thoughts in mind, thinking back to what Ms. Cosby stated earlier when all of our schools were fully accredited. And then the state changed the test. So, and we're going to master it. Richmond Public Schools is going to get to that point. And then the state will change the test. I often think, and as we speak in terms of comparing to other areas, there are very few that have the challenges that we have. There's no need to compare me with Fairfax County. All right, it doesn't add up. But in terms of the data piece, we really get to the point of looking at our data, and we align it with attendance, discipline, your reading, your math. It's so important to have that data in place, and there are teachers who can put data together in an awesome manner. Otherwise, you're just going through the motions of teaching. We can have awesome lesson plans, elaborate lesson plans, but if you're not measuring what's being taught, how do you know what your children have mastered? So I'm a firm believer in that you do have to, and I appreciate your putting this before us, and I look forward to receiving it even more often. Something to think about in terms of I'm glad you mentioned in terms of our budget piece, but making sure we do have enough reading specialists in place. Because that is important, to have one reading specialist or two reading specialists for an entire school of 600 or 700 students. That's not enough. Really, every grade level needs a specialist, but that's utopia. Then I think also in terms of the celebration piece, money was put in the budget this school year. So I hope that as our superintendent just stated, there's 9% here and 6% here. I hope that each principal is reminded to do something in celebration of. Been there, done that. We used to celebrate 9%, while everybody else was making 23 and 45 and 85. And we celebrate step by step by step. So, but then sometimes we forget and we get into the mode of gotta get it at the end of the year, gotta get it at the end of the year. But we must celebrate and acknowledge those teachers, those parents who send their children to school every day. So I do hope that I'm gonna have to believe that this is going to get better. But I also know that when we look at teacher turnover, for those schools that have that mastery piece in place, the turnover is less than those schools that have more challenges, that we in the system have no control over. The environment, the home, the neighborhood. Every parent that sends his or her child to school, trust us to make the best decisions and the best efforts for their children's success. But there are also so many, we have a lot on our plates, and I think we're gonna get it done. I thank you for what you've done, and continue to share this data with us, but the more we see, the better. That when we go into the schools to visit, we can share. When I go to Shimaranzo tomorrow, I say, oh, you went up 6% in math, and just to lift people up as well. So thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And one note on this, I think it's one of the things I've tried to be intentional about is really talking about a focus on learning, not a focus on assessment. And so it's what tells us that students have learned this skill or this standard. And similarly, we're really trying to help message to move away from test-driven instruction versus standards-aligned instruction that engages and excites students. And that's not always the same. That's not the same mindset of every administration. So I think teachers have had to endure a lot of different messages around the type of teaching, and they do have a lot of pressure around assessment. So in talking with teachers around data, I think it's important that we're talking from a learning orientation. So what is this data telling you in terms of what your students are learning and what we need to do differently? So we're trying to make sure that we're talking about it in that way so that it doesn't feel like a gotcha to our teachers from the central office. Thank you very much.
And I have one question and then a follow-up to what Ms. Berg said, because I think what she laid out is kind of like how I would love to see some of these academic reports I think it would be very helpful for us at a very, very high level when we look at schools to look at something just horizontal, attendance, discipline, teacher experience, what else did you mention, Ms. Berg? Academic piece. Just to be able to see it school by school, that would be great.
Thank you.
And that was just responding to what she said. But my question, why I raised my hand. So you mentioned Elkhart Thompson. They've done a really good job, you said, of creating space for remediation.
Did I say that? I don't think
must
I think
have-
I said schools that are doing, I think that elementary schools are able to do that built into their schedule.
Yeah, and then
And that,
in response to the question, not a really great way, but they are addressing, they're able to create space for remediation. Elkhart Thompson, in response to Ms. Page's query.
yes, and and a big part of that is their after-school programming.
Their after school, that was my question. I want to know
Yes.
how they were doing it. Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. I understand that the high school scores are measured by the SOL and the SATs. But I wonder why you could also include that data here, and how is that data looking at the high school level for the math score?
Sure. The high school courses MAP does not do a projected proficiency on the high school courses data. Part of this is a methodology that's based on a linking study to our standard. So the MAP folks would be the first to tell you that none of this is not a perfect measure, but they do not provide that for high school. We are we will have when it's the time for the next update is what we call SGA scores, which is the equivalent for high school is a mock exam on the SOLs, and so we'll use that to project proficiency. And so those are coming in. I mean, we basically try to stagger them so there's not any one subject, multiple subjects in a week. So over the next several weeks, that data will be coming in. So I'll be able to report out on that next.
Thank you, Dr. F. Okay.
It was so exciting to spend so much time talking about achievement. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay. Now we would like to receive an update on Goal 5, equity.
Yes. At an earlier presentation in January, when we reported on Goal 5, for high school, we primarily focused on AP access and did not include IB access. And so this update, at your request, we went back and got that information. So this is an update to the equity presentation earlier this year for the number, for IB access at Thomas Jefferson High School in particular. Just as a reminder, the IB diploma program is only available to 11th and 12th graders. So unlike AP courses, while generally students take those in 11th and 12th grade, some students can take AP courses earlier, whereas IB limits that to 11th and 12th grade. And IB courses, similar to AP, confer college credit with a certain qualifying score. So in terms of access and offerings, the course offerings at TJ between 2017-18, 18-19, and 19-20 have consistently increased in terms of the number of IB courses that are offered. And the reason this number is so much higher than, you won't see a school with 31 AP courses. For IB, almost every course is offered in 2 levels, a standard level or a higher level. They're both still very rigorous, so even the IB standard level is akin to an AP level. And the higher level is akin to, like, if you think of a math standard level would be like calculus AB, AP calculus AB, and a math higher level would be like AP calculus BC, if that makes sense. So that's the reason you have so many, the number is higher, is almost every course has 2 levels, but the standard level, despite the name, is still much more rigorous. And in order to participate in the IB program, students have to take a designated mix of HL and SL courses. I can talk to you more about that if you're interested. But the number of courses offered has increased. Additionally, the number of students taking at least one IB course or more has increased since 2017-18. We had a slight dip last year, and then that number has gone up by almost 30 students this year. And then in terms of percent of students, we've also seen an increase from last year to this year in terms of about 3%, but a minor increase since 2017-18. So we're continuing to engage with principal seers to make sure increasingly more students are enrolled in at least one IB course at TJ.
Thank you. I don't know if this was intended to address another agenda request, but I do have concerns at TJ. I'm very happy that we're offering the IB program, but I am concerned that we're not providing the supports to actually make it all that it can be. And just looking at the data for students actually graduating with an IB diploma and the amount of teacher training and just general feedback from the school. So I think I requested at another meeting and just want to reiterate my request that I would be interested in a deeper dive in exploring IB across our city at Chimborazo, Brown, and TJ. And if we're going to say that we offer the program, then I think we should do it right. And so what do we need to do to do it right?
Okay. Again, thank you, Dr. Epp, for this information. So my question is, are we seeing the numbers translate, like from the middle school, the number of students that's in IB, the application IB, are we seeing those numbers translate to the high school, TJIB?
The students going from Brown to TJ, I do not know that off the top of my head, but we can get that.
Okay, and if not, I mean, I know we all want, our students want options, so they may not want to matriculate, continue in the IB program in high school, but why? So I guess, what's the plan to revitalize the IB? Because the numbers still low. I mean, we have IB elementary, IB middle school, but our numbers is not apples to apples.
I mean, there is I think we can get into more of this when we do a dedicated agenda item. In short, these schools are not on a feeder pattern, so I think that's an added difficulty, and I'm not sure about the why behind that decision when it was made, when the program's launched. And then the second is, I think every school leader, as well as my team, would concur that we need to do a full step back on IB and do a reset in terms of what, making sure that, and we've begun that work with each of the school leaders and have begun doing a lot more to get both the principals as well as the teachers into more training this year. But I do think there has to be a broader reset if we continue to offer the program.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is regarding the subgroups. So in the other equity presentation we had, there was the breakdown by subgroup. And I didn't see that in this document. And I think for TJ, it would also be relevant to show, how many of the students that are taking
we can get that information. I think the first was an oversight, and the second will require a bit more pulling the data together. Thank you very much.
Mr. Hughes, an update on goal 8 and specifically attendance.
All right, good evening, Madam Chair Owen, school board members, Superintendent Cameras. I am here to present an update regarding student attendance. As you may recall, chronic absenteeism occurs when a student misses 10% or more of the school year, regardless of the reason for absence. The school's chronic absenteeism rate is very important because it's an indicator for accreditation. A school cannot reach accreditation having a chronic absenteeism rate higher than 24%. This evening's presentation compares last year's chronic absenteeism rate after the 90th day of school for students to this year's chronic absenteeism rate against the same time frame. As you can see, the data is presented as pie charts showing 3 different tiers. Tier 1, which is indicated by green, shows our students who have missed less than 10% of the school year. Tier 2, which is indicated by yellow, are for students who have missed 10 to 20% of the school year. And red, which is the Tier 3, shows students who have missed more than 20% of the school year. Again, this data is reported after the 90th day of school. So what we are looking at are students who have missed 9 or more days of school. Those students are on track to be chronically absent or already chronically absent. Currently, we have 16.9 or 16.9% of our students who are currently on track to be chronically absent or already chronically absent. That represents an increase of 0.8% from last year. Last year, we were at 16.1% chronically absent. So we're slightly behind our rate from last year. To lower our chronic absenteeism rate, we will continue to have our attendance teams focus on students who are having attendance issues, trying to identify root causes, and put supports in place. As Ms. Burke mentioned earlier, our schools do have access to celebration funds, which they will use to celebrate kids who have good attendance or who will improve their attendance over the next 90 days. Additionally, we are working with principals and other key stakeholders to get feedback on a comprehensive, data-driven attendance strategy that we will gladly present to the board at the end of this month. I'll pause there for questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Harry, thanks, ma'am. A couple of questions. First, and you and I, we've spoken about this, and I've likely addressed this with some of my colleagues too, but in our secondary schools, one of my critiques, past practices related to sometimes it was folks in the front office making phone calls, understandably because our teachers already have so very much on them. However, that said, often my experience has at times been that folks in when I reference central office, front office is a better way to say that of a school. Take, for example, Huguenot, large school, 13 plus students. Because they didn't have a relationship with the student or the parent and or guardians, it didn't have the same meaningful effect or impact as if someone else in the school that did have that kind of relationship. So that's my first question. If you could address where we're at in our secondary schools in trying to personalize those phone calls, and then my second question, I think it's a question, regards what this body did in adopting our attendance policy the other year, and I had some thoughts that I shared last year at the end of the year. I won't speak to that now. But are you prepared to project? I mean, you kind of have herein how many students will not advance because of chronic absenteeism? Because it seems to me if we enforce the attendance policy, it's going to be approximately 17% of our students. There's my two questions. I'm sorry, I know. One's a softball and one's not.
Are they? Well, thank you for those thoughtful questions. With regards to your first question, taking attendance is a state mandate. All of our teachers are supposed to take attendance. And at high school, that means they're supposed to take attendance at each period. Now, I know our school leaders have put expectations in place that our teachers should call parents when students are absent. Now, I cannot confirm that that's happening. So that's something I'm going to have to look further into. But what's interesting to your question, in my opinion, is you talked about relationships. And that, yes, is part of our restorative practices work, is to find time where teachers and students build intentional relationships. Last time I was up here, I presented the 11 schools where we're going to kick that work off. And I do think if teachers can build better relationships with students, it's going to have a positive impact on overall student attendance. With my response to your second question is, again, remember that the waiver policy, there's an opportunity for parents or students themselves to explain unique circumstances or medical hardships that will be taken into account when it's decided if a waiver will be granted or denied. I think we do know the reality, which we cannot retain 17% of our students. However, at the high school, as you know, we have the ability to withhold credit from students, and I believe that is a motivator. And then for our kindergarten through 5th grade students, we do know in many instances, probably in most instances, it's really, we got to do a better job of partnering with our parents, because at that grade level, it's our parents who are really responsible for ensuring their students come to school every day, and we need to connect with parents to figure out what barriers they're encountering. And with the 6th through 8th grade, I think we're just going to have to do it like we did it last year and look at it on a kid-by-kid basis. This year, I do plan to employ the principal directors in helping to decide the attendance waivers. And we will definitely keep you updated once we launch the process, and as the process goes along, provide you with relevant data.
Ms. Gibson, and Mr. Barlow, Ms. Cosby, Ms. Burke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I first noticed just a personal preference. I think just in terms of loading the data, I would prefer, I think it's a standard spreadsheet that had both the percentages and because the pie charts, I'm not sure that they really visually tell the story that we're trying to see in terms of changes from year over year. My question is regarding the new positions that we added to the budget this year that were kind of I think the folks with more social work experience that have taking on a different role than the attendance officers that we eliminated from the budget. If you could talk a little bit about how that has gone, what their role has been, and how you see that evolving next year, hopefully with the addition of bringing those attendance officers back online again.
Right. Our social workers, as you can imagine, wear many hats in our school division. And some of that is a focus on attendance. I will say that our social workers are very hardworking, very diligent, and they do their best to address student issues as well as ensure that we're in compliance with the VDOE. What I am excited about is getting their input as well as the input of principals and other stakeholders as we develop this new comprehensive strategy that we will roll out at the end of this month.
Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. Hughes. I'm particularly concerned about, well, one of these charts which really does visualize a dramatic issue pretty seriously, which is with respect to the alternative school. And I have to imagine that there is some transition as students are going through disciplinary hearings and things of that nature, but still the percentages that we're seeing for chronic absenteeism here for our students in the alternative school are really dramatic. So I'm curious to know in particular what we are doing or what we will be trying to do to help with that. And I am also curious to know whether the vendor that we're working with has been demonstrating progress. I see that the yellow has dropped here, so that's encouraging. But we are looking at 82.5% chronic absenteeism rate, which is really discouraging.
Absolutely. Your concern is shared by the administration. I will say that Principal Trotter over at the Richmond Alternative School actually keeps a separate spreadsheet showing how many absences students accumulate once they are actually officially enrolled at RAS. So I can provide that data to you. But yes, we have to figure out something because kids are coming to RAS with a number of absences. In some cases, kids are already chronically absent by the time they enroll into RAS, and this is something that we have to better understand and think about ways that if a student does make a mistake and has to go in front of a panel, one, how can we get them in front of a hearing officer faster? And then two, what measures can we put in place to make sure that the child and the parent understand, like, once a decision is made, you can immediately start at RAS, and we have to figure out how to have really a slam dunk orientation so kids feel welcome at RAS. I do think Camelot has done a decent job of addressing this, but I think, as you all know, there's power in data, and I look forward to sharing Lamont's data with you all.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that would be illuminating.
Ms. Cosby, then Ms. Burke.
Thank you for this. I am also interested in seeing year-to-date data, like not just the 90th day of school, but more recent data. We can look at maybe the beginning of this now, and to look at it, to compare that, because I think some of these numbers will be a little bit different. And I haven't had a chance to like add up for each school, but if we were to, I'm just piggybacking off of Mr. Young's question, but if we were to look at this data now, do we know, and let's say that attendance was the only measure for passing the SOL, how many of our schools would pass the SOL based on this attendance data right now? Accreditation. I'm sorry, what did I say? Oh, okay, yeah, accreditation.
Yes, because the state looks at chronic absenteeism for both excused and unexcused absences, I think the state has accounted for that, and that's best demonstrated in knowing that you can have up to 24% of your population chronically absent and still make accreditation. Now that number's way too high. I don't think anybody will say that's what we're shooting for, is to be at 24%. No, we're shooting to have the lowest chronic absenteeism rate possible. But right now, based on that 24%, there are only a few schools that would not be eligible at this time to be accredited.
Okay.
Ms. Burke, and then Dr. Sapini.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Looking at the data, I'm surprised at one item that I see across the board. Numbers have changed from last year to this year in many of the schools. Some of our children are moving around from one community to the other. A lot of schools have lost maybe more than 20 or 30 students. what my question is, I want to make sure I'm on the right track. Last year, I know when a lot of our high schools offered school hours in the evening to allow students to make up time for hours they missed in the classrooms for SOLs. Is that, which that means this, that's still in place, this data would change, or can that take place, number one?
Yes.
So because a student right now may have missed how many ever days and is in the red, but if he or she has a chance to go to night school or twilight school or whatever else to make it up, then that data would change.
That's correct.
So are those opportunities in place as of late, or?
Yes, there are opportunities happening in all 5 of our comprehensive high schools for students to make up seat hours after school.
So the hope there is that, well, it should, if the students follow through, that data should be better.
That's correct. And I will say that this data is pretty fluid, as we have a lot of student transitions that happen between schools every day. And we do, again, give opportunities for students to make up lost seat time. So this data actually could swing dramatically for the better or for the worse within the next, like every 10 school days. So it's important that we keep our foot on the gas pedal.
So really, after every 9 weeks reporting period, there may be a difference in that data.
Absolutely.
So I'm thinking about what Ms. Cosmo just asked in regards to seeing that data, but you would be able to see the difference between, this is now second semester, third 9 weeks?
Yes, today was actually the 110th day of school for students.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing data, attendance data, due to those students making that time up.
Yep.
I hope that works. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Sapini?
Thank you. Just 2 quick questions. One, since you have your pie chart, does that mean you also have the data for specifically seniors and 5th graders?
I can get that data, but no, I don't have the data at my disposal right now.
No, I mean, as long as you can get it just to see as far as potentially graduation
Sure, we could break
rates
it
and
down
so
by
on and so
grade
forth.
level.
Right, right. And secondly, which I think someone mentioned, are you confident that the action that your team are trying to put in place will be effective with the amount of time that we have left of school?
I do believe that we have a fighting chance to either get back to our mark from last year or maybe lower it slightly. I'm not as confident that we will hit our target this year. If you remember, our target this year was for 13% chronic absenteeism. Last year, we did make a dramatic gain in good attendance. Last year, we went from 19% chronic absenteeism to 15%. So a 4% decrease in 1 year is quite notable. Unfortunately, right now, we're not seeing those same drops this year. So I do believe we can get back to our rate from last year.
So when will we have, I guess, the next update to see how your team's doing?
We can do one
after the next.
Sure, we can do one after the 120th day.
Thank you.
I just have a question. Couple of questions. I think I heard that if a student stops coming to school, they continue to be marked as absent until they get a request from another school to transfer the records. Is that so, and if so, for how long? Because at least in some of the schools on the south side, sometimes some of our students actually leave the country.
Right.
And I don't guess they ever get a request for records from a school not in the country. And I don't know if they always do if it's out of state. Do you have any knowledge about that?
I'm sorry, I do not.
I really am noticing quite a drop in membership in a lot of our schools. Now, do we have a feel for our overall numbers in our schools? Is that declined this year? Not in attendance, but actual membership. Did that decline this year? Do you know?
I'm sorry, I don't know that either.
Because that actually has an impact on our funding.
Right.
And it really is, I mean, there's some schools that have significant growth in membership. But, I mean, even in places like Open, you know, it's, where are those kids? Where'd they go?
Just to clarify, overall, our state reported student enrollment is up from last year to this year. But depending upon when you grab the data to look at how many kids are at school at a certain time, you can get pretty widely varying numbers. So that might be some of what you're seeing there. We also have intra-year transiency. So this is sort of our best apples to apples that I can do. But you're also going to see a little bit of variation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hughes.
All right.
This is very enlightening.
Thank you all.
Okay. So now we move to personnel actions.
Good evening. This evening, you have the recommended personnel actions, which include the nomination of 10 employees, the change of contract for 8 employees, the transfer of 1 employee, the resignation of 18 employees, the furlough of 14 employees, the return from leave of 3 employees, the rescission of employment by 1 employee, the name change of 1 employee, and the unfortunate passing of 1 employee.
Do you have a motion to accept personnel action?
So move.
Second.
Is there discussion? Okay. Mr. Marlowe?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson? Abstain. Mr. Young?
Abstain.
Dr. Sapini?
Abstain.
Ms. Cosby?
Abstain.
Ms. Burke? Yes. Ms. Owen? Yes. Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
And Ms. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
All righty. There are no board travel and activity requests. So we move on to our legislative update.
Good evening, Chairwoman Owen, Superintendent Cameras, members of the board. Matthew Stanley here with a legislative update for you tonight. We have had a very active session, and the General Assembly is entering their last week. There have been a lot of exciting moments over session. I was reviewing actually some testimony today with some of our high school students, Asia Good, another student named Melly, really advocating based on their own personal experiences in their schools about the needs for things like more advanced placement tests, more school counselors, talking about the significant caseloads of students that there are for every counselor in our schools. They've really shined, doing an excellent job telling legislators what the true needs of our schools really are. So as we go into this last week, there are just a few things that the General Assembly is still wrapping up, so I'm able to tell you a little bit about what's happening. The main thing that is wrapping up, though, is the budget, and they are currently in a conference committee. So 2 weeks ago, the House and Senate both released their budget proposals, and now conferees have been appointed that are negotiating those final differences. I will note that Delegate Carr from City of Richmond is a conferee this year on the state budget, and so as you think about any final priorities that you would like to emphasize with the legislature, I would recommend reaching out directly to Delegate Carr and expressing any of those sentiments that you have. As the budgets were released 2 weeks ago, we did provide for you a side-by-side budget comparison. I provided it to you via email, and it's also availavailable on our website at rvaschools.net/advocacy. That will help give an overview of where we stand on the two versions of the budget and some of the specific provisions in each of them. I'll go through a couple of those items tonight, just our main priority areas, starting with equity-based funding. That was really our top legislative priority this session. Unfortunately, the General Assembly did not move forward with creating an equity fund this year. We have more work to do on that topic to address legislators' concerns about how some of the policy changes would impact all school divisions across the Commonwealth. There were concerns that some school divisions would receive less funding. And then there are also just questions that legislators have about how the funds under the equity fund would be used in comparison to the current at-risk add-on funds and prevention, intervention, and remediation funds that would have created that new funding stream. So in the House budget this year, there is actually language asking the Department of Education and school divisions to provide further reporting and analysis on how those funds are used to better inform their discussions next year. But that is very much an issue that we are going to continue to advocate for, and we have more work to do. Now, even though that they did not approve the equity fund this year, the House did go above and beyond what the governor proposed for the at-risk add-on program. So the extra funding that they've added into that in an amount of $34.9 million additional, that does go a long way, and that is a key reason why the House budget actually favors Richmond Public Schools more than the Senate budget does, even though the Senate budget funds other types of things at a higher level. That at-risk add-on funding, we are the 5th highest earner of that in the Commonwealth, and so it really does benefit us. So for that reason alone, we are very much in favor of what the House is doing with their budget proposal. In early childhood education, both the House and the Senate approved the governor's funding package for pre-K expansion to 3- and 4-year-olds. The only difference between them was that the House cut some of the funding for the mixed delivery grants. Those are grants to go to private providers in the community to increase access to slots in our communities. In regards to teacher compensation, the House and the Senate took different approaches on that this year. They both went above and beyond what the governor proposed. The governor, if you recall, proposed nothing in the first year of the budget and a 3% increase in the second year. The House took the approach of providing 2% increases in each year of the budget, and the Senate proposed a 3% bonus in the first year. That we think that they did that because they were able to save some money on retirement benefits, the cost of those premiums, and they also then don't have to factor in that bump into the raise that they proposed for the second year, which is a 4% increase. So we have heard concerns about both of these approaches. The House is maybe not doing enough, and people don't like the bonus in the Senate. So we expect there to be some sort of middle ground compromise on teacher salaries, but we do expect that the General Assembly will be approving some form of a teacher compensation adjustment in both years of the budget. For school counselors, this continued to be a major topic of discussion at the General Assembly this year. We heard from several more conservative members of the General Assembly, as well as from some staff, that there are concerns that there are not enough school counselors in the Commonwealth to actually staff our schools at the lowest nationally recommended ratio of 1 counselor for every 250 students. So because of those concerns and because of the General Assembly, both chambers wanting to put money into some other priorities and spread the love around, the House has proposed lowering the ratio down to 1 to 325 students, and the Senate has proposed lowering it down to 1 to 300. So both of these still go above and beyond what was funded in the budget last year. If you recall, the General Assembly lowered ratios and then didn't fund it. So they are at least doing that and then some additional, continuing to make progress towards getting down to that 1 counselor for every 252 students. Another topic that received a lot of attention this year was the governor's proposal to add more funding for English language learner teachers. We were very excited in the fall when the Board of Education announced their proposal to base these ratios on the proficiency rates of students. Neither the governor put that in his proposed budget, and both the House and the Senate did not advance that specific language. But the governor's proposal to reduce the overall ratio from 1 to 59 students down to 1 to 50 students did get maintained in the Senate's budget, but the House took a slightly more phased approach, and in the first year they are lowering it down 1 to 54 students, and then the second year down to that 1 to 50 number. So progress is being made both ways, but we have a lot more work to go. We really do believe that that proficiency-based proposal is the right move for the state and would be encompassed as part of the larger SOQ recommendations that we will be continuing to urge the General Assembly to act on. And then finally, on the topic of school construction, the Senate has proposed some initial funding to convert existing school construction loan program that helps schools with interest payments into an actual grant program that would just give money to localities for school construction and modernization. Now, it sounds great, but they've only provided $55 million, and this is in the Senate budget only, $55 million split over 2 years for these grants. Now, we have some general estimates from the legislature over prior work that they've done that school construction needs in the Commonwealth rise above $3 billion. So unfortunately, $55 million is just a drop in the bucket. But we are grateful for their recognition of this being an issue and their movement on advancing the bill that RPS requested, SB 888, introduced by Senator McClellan, which was a collaboration between Richmond Public Schools, the Richmond City Council with Councilmember Addison, and also with Mayor Stoney and his team. We've all been advocating on this together, and we really have brought a large coalition from across the state. Very happy that we are providing a venue for discussing school construction over the course of the entire year and at a level that also brings in the executive branch for collaboration and hopefully looking at ways that the state can try to help localities save money on school construction. Now, that bill has passed the Senate. It also has passed out of the House Rules Committee. Today it was on the floor, and tomorrow it will receive its vote in the House, a full floor vote. Now, there have been some amendments that have been made regarding how many members of the General Assembly from the House and the Senate are going to be on that, so the bill is going to go to conference for them to negotiate that, and the next 48 hours will be pretty crucial in any final outreach to legislators on that topic. So if you have any legislators that you would like to reach out to, I would encourage you to do that tomorrow. And then I'll just end by noting that overall the House does put more money into the budget for public education. Their proposal is about $1.4 billion in new funding. The Senate was about $1.3 billion in new funding. That compares to the governor's proposed budget, which had $1.2 billion in new funding. So overall, we have made another incremental progress gain over last year's funding for public education, but there is still a lot more work to do. In the coming weeks, we'll be preparing a final written legislative report for you that outlines not only all the priorities that we've been discussing all session, but all of the other legislation that we've been tracking, from any types of unfunded mandates that we've been dealing with to any changes with graduation and academic requirements. There haven't been that many of those, and any other bills related to teachers, staff, students, et cetera. Funding will continue to be a top priority as we move forward, but all of those other policy changes are important nonetheless, and at the end of the month, we will have a full detailed presentation for you on that. I'm happy to take any questions tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley.
Thank you.
All right. I'm sorry, did you have, look, did you have any? Okay, good. All right, rezoning grandfathering update.
Good evening, all. I'd like to provide a quick update on how the grandfathering work is going through our rezoning project. So right now, we're currently reviewing all of the data we've received from the schools, and we should have a more granular school-by-school level report available next board meeting. But as of today, 56% of eligible students have opted to go to their new school. So these are kids that have been rezoned and have opted to go to the new school next year. Conversely, 44% of the kids have chosen to exercise the grandfathering option. So they'll be staying at their current school. It's important to note here we're talking about a relatively small population of students, though. I know the numbers sound large, but the only eligible kids here were rising 5th graders, 8th graders, and 12th graders that were impacted by rezoning. So for example, at the elementary level, we're talking about 6% of the kids that were rezoned, and of that 6%, 13% were 5th graders. So it's a pretty small population of kids, maybe 500 total.
Okay, so you haven't heard from all the students yet.
We've heard from a lot, about 80%. Right.
Is there a deadline for them to make this choice?
The deadline was last week, but we still want to keep working with families to try to get their input. So we're still doing that work.
All right. Thank you. Anyone? Mr.
Mr. Barlow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, my question largely did deal with the response rate. I was curious about that. So you mentioned that 44% or 56% have opted to go to the new school and 44% have chosen to opt into staying at their current school. I assume that we were waiting, my impression is that we were waiting for students to opt out of being rezoned as opposed to opt into being zoned into a new school.
That's correct.
Okay, so 44% total of opted. Okay, great.
Ms. Gibson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So at our next meeting, because it seems like the school-by-school data is really the most critical, because it, you know, there are likely a couple schools where there might be a lot more grandfathering than other schools.
Yeah.
So I look forward to getting that information. And then I'm also wondering if at the next meeting too, there might be more information about the open enrollment at Mumford and Carver. And I think overall, open enrollment in general,
Yeah.
and how that is, as it's going to be winding up.
Yeah, that's why we don't have a deck tonight, because there's just so many moving pieces, one of them being open enrollment, which, you know, we should have some data this week on that. So, yes. All right, thank you.
Mr. Singer. All right. And, Ms. Payne?
I'll wait.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it. So Dr. F, once more, the middle school program of studies.
Good evening. I am presenting the middle school program of studies for, this is first read, yes?
Yes.
Okay, just, thank you. I was ill at the last meeting, so I just want to make sure I remember that correctly. So this is our inaugural draft of the middle school program of studies, separate from the high school document. And so each year, similar to what we do at the high school program of studies, we are doing the same for middle school. And among listing the middle school courses available, this program of studies is designed to include details on the courses available, but also high school credit-bearing courses that are available in middle school, suggested course sequences to help students and families and counselors with course planning, as well as guidelines for to help parents understand the impact that their course selection choices have on high school options, because that does start in 6th grade. We will bring this back for approval at our next board meeting. We do have a link on our counseling website that where the public can provide input, and if you all have any questions between now and then, reaching out to me directly or providing feedback to me directly would be most appreciated, so that I can bring you a revised second read for approval.
Thank you, Dr. F.
Thank you.
A lot of rigorous work has gone into this.
Thank you.
Okey-dokey. So, the Amelia Street, Mr. Cameras?
Good evening, everyone. The administration would like to propose that we actually press pause on the renaming of Amelia Street for the following reasons. There seems to be a fair amount of unsettledness in the community about the direction for the name, number one. Number two, because the school itself is undergoing a series of changes, as we talked about last time around, in terms of trying to mainstream more of the children there, along with the incorporation of other programs like 13 Acres and the Real School. We feel it might be prudent both to be responsive to the community and, given the ongoing work we're doing with the state to really evolve what Amelia Street is, to press pause on this. There's no immediate need like we have with the new schools to make the change, and give the administration, the community, and our work with the state some time to progress and to return to this next school.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Okay, now, these informational items are just information. So it's all on board docs. There should not be any concern about that. New business. Ms. Cosby, and then Ms. Gibson.
A couple of things. Although for RPS press releases, that's on board docs, I understand that, but would like to get some information about our website, a couple of things. One, if we can update some of our demographic information, it's 2014, 2015, some of it.
This is on the website?
Yeah. Just start to update. Would be good. And second, we did, during our public comment period, there was a concern about our transcripts. And so are we doing, and given that, you know, there is, one issue is one too many. And so if we can look at and do some type of audit just to make sure that we're not, I know we're not in the same situation we were before. I mean, we've come a long way, but just to make sure that we have indeed reviewed all of our graduating seniors and juniors, but just to do another review. That would be good.
If I may, auditing is now standard practice, so we do that as a matter of course. We also recently had the state review the audit, and they were quite pleased with our transcripts this year. So certainly there may be 1, 2, 3 things out there. As they come to our attention, we of course correct them immediately. So I personally met with the individuals you heard from. Mr. Hofstadter worked to get that resolved. As for the larger policy question, this was something I was going to raise in our agenda setting to see if the board would like to take this up at its next meeting. As I shared with the family, if the board were to make this policy retroactive, you will have some families who are advantaged by it, or some students whose GPAs would improve. You'll have some that will go down, and so it cuts both ways. I know the recommendation was to potentially consider allowing families to opt in or not. So let's do this if the board would agree, rather than try to do this off the cuff. I'll raise it at agenda setting. We can have a more thoughtful discussion at our next meeting, share information with you, and then you can make a decision about how to proceed. Does that work?
Ms. Dewar, and then Ms. Gibson, and now I'm looking on this side.
Thank you. That's a good idea about the, I'd like to understand the unintended consequences of that policy. And then I also just wanted to thank you for your email today about the coronavirus. And I didn't completely digest it, but I just want to reiterate that as new information comes up, it would be great to be kept in the loop. And if we need to hold an emergency board meeting or whatever to figure out contingency planning, you know, I just think we can't be underprepared.
Okay, Ms. Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The other thing too, I think, as it relates to the middle school program of studies and also the discussion about the transcripts, you know, I think it's important to see, to understand where each classes are offered. So again, it paints the equity picture, and I think too, in terms of open enrollment, parents will want to know if classes are only in certain places. And so I'd like to see that information And I'd also like, in terms of our policy as it pertains to transcripts, my hope is, I want to understand what policy looks like, for other jurisdictions in the state, as it pertains both to the, including middle school courses and GPA, and then the other piece that I've brought up a couple of times is specific to the weighting formula. So the availability of classes, what other jurisdictions are doing, and the overall weighting. Those are the great things.
Ms. Cosby?
Sorry, I don't know if it'd be my last one, but also in public comment, we did hear about the situation with the basketball game at Armstrong, and what?
We have already contacted.
We have, okay, I just wanted to make sure, okay.
Just to piggyback off my colleague, what happened at Armstrong is not the first time that it's happened. It's a reoccurring. Exchange of inappropriate language to our students. So I just want to reiterate, this is not the first time. This year is not the first time, but it's never been addressed. It just has, flown under or pushed under the rug or what have you. But so I'm glad this has been addressed with the VHSL, and we need to take it further than that. So I just want to reiterate, this is not the first time this happened.
Okay. Do we have any announcements? No?
We have to go into close? We're going into close? We're going into close?
Well, Ms. Burke has an announcement.
I'm delighted to, Franklin Military Academy will be sending 18 students to West Point on this coming Wednesday for a 3-day visitation. And it's being sponsored by the Richmond Links Incorporated and the Army, the military. So we're getting ready to send 18 students on Wednesday afternoon, 12 noon, to West Point Juniors at Franklin Military as a pre-college opportunity. So I'm excited about that. My other thought is, I'd like to thank the superintendent for his comments regarding this virus that's going around per se. So thank you so very much. That was very timely and very, very, very easy to follow, from washing your hands to washing the doorknobs or whatever else. So thank you for that timely message in regards to making sure that we are cared for regarding the virus that's going around.
Any other announcements? So give me an update. Do we need to go into closed? Would you not need to go into closed?
We don't?
This meeting is adjourned.
Excuse me. Oh, I'm so
Would you all like to do a few photos right now?
You ready?